All right, we'll get started here. Welcome. Thanks for coming out on this night. This is the School Board of Prescott Board of Education regular meeting. I'll call this meeting to order, subject section 1983 Wisconsin statutes. Our first item is to adopt the agenda. Is there any changes that we need to make here?
No official changes. I did want to just point out that there was a late flip-flop in the order of the information and discussion, but it was on the website and no new information was posted, but we'll start with the superintendent proposal followed by the academic calendar.
All right, so we will need a motion to adopt the agenda. And before we do that, Steve and Vicki, are you able to hear us?
Yes.
Yep, I hear you fine, just fine.
Okay, we can hear you too. Thank you. So we will take a motion to adopt the agenda here.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? And that carries. Item 3 is Pledge of Allegiance. Tanya, would you care to lead us?
Yes.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Move on to the next item, recognition of visitors. Is there anybody in the audience that would care to be recognized? Just come forward and state your name and municipality, please. Thank you.
Good evening, can you hear me?
Yep.
All right, I'm Joe Roll from the town of Clifton. Noticed a couple of items on the agenda for tonight I wanted to just give some feedback to the board on. One item is, it looks as though we're considering an early release on Mondays for our children. And I want to just state that I think that's a mistake. I think that if we learned anything through COVID, we've learned that face-to-face instruction is very, very important for our children to achieve the best achievement that they can reach in our district. I was taking a look at the district report cards on the Wisconsin DPI site, and I noticed it's very visible what happened to our kids during COVID. And hopefully the board has had time to look at some of that. But specifically, if you look at English language arts and mathematics, the bottom two categories of our student population, that being below basic and basic, increased in the past 2 years. And in fact, 53.5% of our students are at a basic or below basic level of mathematics. And if you look back to the 2018-19 year, that number was 46.4. So I guess I'm just here to tell you as a parent, I think more is more and less is less. So less time in front of teachers is less instruction for the entire student population. The other thing I would just mention, it's my sincere hope that discussions later in the agenda relating to the interaction with the public of this board at open meetings, that you're making it easier for people to get up here and share their point of view with you and not making it more difficult or challenging. And I'll leave you with that. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Is there anybody else that would care to be recognized at this time?
Magnuson? Better?
Yep.
Okay. Taslyn Magnuson, parent of 2 kids in the high school, Prescott. I'm here tonight to speak in support of the teachers, specifically in strong support of the proposal for a 2-hour early dismissal. When I saw this on the agenda, I reached out to some of the teachers to ask what it meant, what they needed to be the best possible teachers in our schools. I ask because I'm not a teacher, I'm a parent. There's a lot weighing on kids, and I can only imagine what life is like for the teachers right now. The teachers might tell you, but they might not, because they're pretty much about supporting the kids no matter what, and don't want to distract from that. But I think teaching is like being on a stage all of the time, and the coordination of student needs has drastically increased over the course of the pandemic. I know my kids' teachers are shifting all kinds of things: grades, assignments, lectures, COVID tests, who is just sick, who doesn't have assignments done, and why. The list is endless, and that's just for my kids. When we give teachers time to collaborate, to prep, and give them time to coordinate, our kids' learning will improve. I believe this. Why? Because I know I'm fragmented across Zoom meetings, coaching, writing kids, fundraising, consulting. I can't see straight. Give me some time to think and prep, and I will show up as my best self. I want my kids' teachers to be able to work with intention and thoughtfulness. Teachers say they need the time. They need this time so they can do just that. They will have stronger lessons and more robust coursework planned with our kids in mind, meeting them where our kids are now, what they need today. I'm pleased to see the school administration recognize this and act quickly to support teachers. I know many may be concerned about the hassle of early release days and worry about lost lesson time. I believe the time that teachers spend planning and coordinating and working together will do at least two things: benefit our children's education exponentially and give teachers real support for something I believe they have asked for right now. It's a simple gift: time and space. Our teachers deserve that. I hope the board will be flexible and supportive of our teachers as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Tasselin. Anybody else who care to be recognized? No? Okay. All right, we'll move on. And I'm gonna go with the paper here. We'll move on to item 5, good news around the district.
Yes, we'll have our administrative team come up. And while they're queuing up, we'll have our student rep begin.
Student council right now is kind of in a lull moment in between like homecoming and Snowfest, so we're looking for some things that we can be doing for our student body. We're still working on that letter to the 26 districts that still have Indian logos in Wisconsin in support of Barb Munson. Besides that, we're starting to plan Snowfest, and we're kind of just asking around for students' input on like things they'd like to see changed. We've been getting a lot of input on that, so that's exciting stuff to see.
Hey, good evening. Josh Figge, principal of Prescott High School. Thank you, Shay. A lot of good news out of the high school. I want to recognize our choir and our band. A couple weeks ago, our choir was up on this stage and had a phenomenal concert. And I think, for me at least, kind of felt like it kicked off the holiday season with some really holiday-themed tunes. Earlier this week, the band also gave us the privilege of watching them on the stage and really brought some powerful music. And one of the moments that stood out to me, I thought that was really great, is after the concert was supposed to be done, the students on the stage wanted to play more so badly as an encore. They wanted to play a pep band tune that even without the director, they played one last tune for the audience, and the audience clapped along. So I thought it was a really, really great moment for our community, just to see everybody clapping along together and the kids just having fun up on stage. We've had our Inclusivity Club. They've been meeting. They had, I believe, what is their second or third meeting, and they've got some projects that they're planning out. Shay is a leader in that club as well. So I'm excited to see what happens in the next couple of weeks with that group. Our School Spirit Club has been working on planning out the very first winter formal. Last week we toured a venue at UW River Falls, and so I think they're garnering quite a bit of excitement from the student community in terms of adding in our first ever winter formal. This Friday is our first Friday enrichment, so during the day we're integrating some enrichment opportunities for kids, some clubs, and then some intramural opportunities in the afternoon, trying to build out kind of that, what we call that RCC, relationships, community, and connections. And then next week, Wednesday, our last day before holiday break, during homeroom, we're going to take a pause and come down here to the auditorium as a community and do what we're just calling our holiday jamboree. So allowing our choir students and our band students to showcase themselves, our garage band to play some holiday tunes to get everyone in the spirit. We want to recognize some of our students who have outstanding achievements during the first trimester and then the first part of trimester number 2. And then some of our staff who have done outstanding things as well this year, and really just kind of go into the holiday break on a very, very good note. Thank you.
Thanks, Josh.
Good evening, Board. Rick Montreal, Dean of Students. I'd like to add one thing to Mr. Figge's report on the high school, and that is to highlight the new Prescott High School behavior matrix. The main good news talking points include the following. Over the last 4 weeks, Mr. Figge and I have written the behavior matrix trying to establish a system related to student behavior, interventions and supports specifically related to what we're seeing this year at school. Those are clear, explicit, and agreed upon expectations by our entire school community. It provides strategies and resolutions to course correct specific behaviors we're seeing this year. And parents will receive a copy of the matrix as stakeholders to what we're incorporating, and the matrix then will also be put on our high school website. Thank you.
Good evening, Andrew Caudill, Activities Director. Just want to do a couple shout outs first to our dance team. Started off the season great, finished first place in small school jazz and pom at the Menominee Invitational and pulled off our Invitational this last Saturday. The weather cooperated somewhat, but it was definitely a great day. And shout out to our boys basketball program as they are ranked 8th in the state in Division III. Last week, I had the opportunity to take 4 students to Stevens Point for the WIAA Sportsmanship and Leadership Summit. We were one of 76 schools around the state that was allowed to come. And I asked the students, what should we bring back? What were the highlights? And they unanimously said we should bring back the information we learned from Mike Herbinski in his presentation from 180. And it's around coaches playing favorites. And I put the slide on the screen. He said that, tell your coaches to not shy away from that. We do play favorites, and it's around coachability. And each of the letters in favorite spells out a trait that student athletes should have to become a coach's favorite. And you have faithful, accountable, versatile, optimistic, resilient, improving, teachable, and enthusiastic. And all of those things are controlled by the student. And so I have sent that information to our head coaches and asked them to incorporate that into our programs. So it definitely was a great day at Stevens Point last week. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew.
Michael Kosmalski, Intermediate School. Good news. I just want to thank the Mullen Parent Committee again for their continued support of our students and staff. They provided prizes for the K-5 Turkey Bingo again this year, and then they also set up a holiday shopping experience for our students, which is taking place this week. So thank you again to them. Congratulations to our yearbook cover winner, Maya Smith. Her cover includes a cardinal emblem, a flag, and a state of Wisconsin on it. And just a reminder for all of you in the crowd that are looking for that perfect Christmas gift is that you can still order your elementary yearbook. As you can see on the screen behind the board, congratulations to Helen Rabel on her nomination to the Herb Cole Teacher Fellowship Award, and another staff at the intermediate, Carrie Sizemore, on her nomination to the Presidential Awards for Excellence in Mathematics and Science. Congratulations to the two of them and their diligent and continued work for our students. Last bit of good news actually comes from the report card from the intermediate school. One of the things that has changed about the report card, and I know the board will have a work session on this coming up, is some of the categories, and along with the way that they report out. One of the reports is that they do include a percentile rank. So compared to the other elementary schools in the state of Wisconsin, the Malone elementary schools are in the 85th percentile in academics. So that means we're top 15% of all schools. In growth, we are in the 97th percentile, so top 3% of all schools in the state of Wisconsin of growing our students. And finally, our target group outcomes. And the target group is a new group on the calculation this year. It is your lowest 25% of students in terms of achievement, academic achievement. It looks at their achievement, it looks also at their growth and at their attendance. And our school ranks at the 92nd percentile, or top 8% in the state of Wisconsin. So a lot of positive accomplishments, and well done by both our students and staff.
Good evening, Mark Inuit, Director of Student Services. This month for Good News, I just wanted to highlight some of the exciting things that were happening with vocational programming across our district. I really want to highlight some of the things that Taylor Belmas is doing at the middle school, as well as Lindsay Kinau at the high school. Taylor, just this month, has opened the Middle School Coffee Cafe, which will be every Wednesday from 8:30 to 9. And her students are really working on customer service, money handling, inventory, a lot of those things in food prep. So I would just invite the board, if you're heading out of town to a job and want to swing by the middle school for some coffee, we would love to hook you up. So just congratulations for Taylor on some innovative thinking and moving school staff and students at the high school. So another exciting thing. And then also, we kind of took a little bit of a hiatus on this, but we are starting to get back into the community for some job opportunities with some of our more significant students. We are now visiting the food pantry and helping them out, and we are hoping to expand some of our community partnerships going into the second semester. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. I'll be brief. I just wanted to, this is the last official board meeting prior to the new year, and we are beginning the holiday season. You saw many of the concerts and bands that are going. We have another event tomorrow evening, and just wanted to wish everybody in our community a happy holiday and a happy new year.
All right, thanks, Rick. We'll move on to item 6, school business. First item here is the consent agenda. In the consent agenda, I'll list these off. We have the November 17th, 2021 board minutes, board checks, non-licensed personnel retirement, resignation, employment change of non-licensed staff, and the annual submission of the ALICE training and drills per SSO mandates. Is there anything in the consent agenda that a board member would like to have removed? If not, I will adopt the consent agenda. Are there any objections? All right, the consent agenda is adopted. We'll move on to item B, new hires, employment, retirement, resignation of licensed staff.
Yes, at this time we have a special education teacher for the high school, Amy Bartles, for a hire.
Anybody have any questions or comments on this one? Steve or Vicky?
Nope.
No.
All right, we'll take a motion.
I'll move to approve the hiring of Amy Bartles for the position of high school special education teacher.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? That carries. We'll move on to item 2, retirement.
No retirements, and then
Item 3,
resignation.
resignation, yep.
We do have a middle school math teacher, Brianne Stites, who submitted her letter of recommendation, and will be moving on to a position outside of education.
Letter of resignation.
Letter of resignation, sorry.
Yep. All right, any questions or comments on this one from any member of the board here? If not, we'll entertain another motion.
I move to approve the acceptance of the letter of resignation of Brianne Stites, 7th grade math teacher.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That carries. Item C is consider an overnight choir trip.
Yes, this is coming up in January, and I have the high school principal, Josh Figge, presenting on behalf of the choir.
Thank you. This is something that pre-COVID was a yearly thing. This is the Dorian Honors Choir. It was a very big yearly tradition for a choir. And it is kind of the Super Bowl, I guess I would say, of our choir program in terms of an honor. We're able to nominate 7 junior or senior students each year based on their achievement and their accolades. Typically, this is some sort of a blend of their local honors choir, if they participated in solo ensemble, what their state solo ensemble ratings would be, or state honors choir, etc. And so there are students that come from all over the Midwest for this, and it's to give more opportunities to some of our best and brightest students. This year we have 7 students who have been nominated by Ms. Camrath to go, and similar to years past, it's in Decorah, Iowa. She would provide the transportation down via the district. Students would have a fee of $35 for the weekend, and they would have the opportunity to collaborate with students from all over the Midwest, as well as some of the really great choir teachers from different high schools and the staff of Luther College down in Decorah, Iowa, to give some private lessons and some small group lessons to augment what they're doing and bring it back here.
All right. Steve, any questions for Josh?
I have none, thank you.
Okay, Vicki?
I didn't quite hear, but what was the cost?
$35 per student.
Okay.
Tanya?
Yeah, no questions. I think it's great. I know we've done it in the past. You've commented about, I guess this is a question, about the teacher driving. Is she providing transportation? Is it a van, or how's that working?
In the past, they've taken a district van, and she's driven, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, no, I think it's great.
All right, Pat?
No questions.
Shay, any questions on this one?
No.
All right. Thanks, Mr. Figge.
Thank you.
We will consider a motion here.
I'll move to approve the overnight high school choir trip to the Dorian Vocal Festival, taking place January 9th through 11th, 2022.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That carries. We'll move on to item D, consider bid for lawn mowing and trimming services for RFP process.
We queued up the music for Mike.
He's good.
He's been up here a lot, but we're going to have him come up for 2 presentations, 2 bids that he got out early, and has some good news.
All right, so we put the RFPs out. We posted on the school website and in the local papers. We only had 2 bidders submit, and they were bidders that were doing the jobs we had contracts with previous. So lawn care, it's Lawn Green bid it, and that's for mowing, the weekly mowing of the 34, almost 35 acres. The weed trimming, take care of the perennial beds up here, which is about 15,000 square feet, includes the mulch and maintenance. And that's for per year, it's $39,675. This is an increase over last year. Last year was $35,000, but with the cost of mulch and everything else, that's increased, and they will guarantee that price for 3 years, for the 3-year contract. So on that one, I would recommend we go with them again. They did a fairly good job. I think every year that they've been doing it's been getting more and more improvement. They have upgraded their equipment for handling the grounds, so I would recommend them. As far as the fertilizer and weed control, True Green bid it, and their bid was the same as the last couple of years, $19,125. So it's just a slight increase, and that includes the weed control for like almost 35 acres 4 times a year. That's mainly sports fields, Dexter fields, in the high school grounds. And then on 20 acres, it's just 2 times a year, and that's just weed control and some small, a little bit of fertilizer. So, and they do use slow release. They do also do our grub control on our athletic fields. So, and that they're going to guarantee their price for 3 years too. So,
All right, thanks, Mike.
Thanks. And we broke those into two in case different people wanted to bid on both, and you can see Long Green did, but your motions are set up like the RFP, one at a time.
All right, Pat, did you have any questions on this?
Not really any questions. I mean, pretty obvious. I think we saw, what is that, about 11% increase in the mowing and trimming from last year, to be expected. I guess the good news is the weed and feed, no increase at all, despite the crazy market.
I was really
conditions.
surprised.
And they're going to hold it for 3 years.
Yes.
Which is awesome.
Yep.
Any idea why you only got 2 bids?
I think part of it is a lot of lawn care, and they're having employee shortages just like everybody else. And I think a lot of people are not taking on any more than what they're doing right now. They want to continue to service their existing customers. That's the only thing I can think of why we didn't get, because in previous, yes, we would get, 4 or 5 bidders on each one. So.
That's it for my questions.
All right, Tanya?
No, that was my same question, so thank you.
Shay, any questions on?
No questions.
Steve?
No, I'm good too, thank you.
All right, Vicky?
No questions.
All right, thanks, Mike. We'll entertain a motion here.
I move to accept the bid from Lawn Green for lawn mowing and trimming services for the 2022, 2023, and 2024 school years.
Second.
I'll second.
Pat beat you, Steve.
Yep.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That one carries. And then item E, which we just talked about as well, we can take a motion on this one too.
I move to accept the bid from True Green for fertilize and weed control services for the 2022, 2023, and 2024 school year.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that one carries. On to item F, consider bids for the purchase of one new yellow bus for the next academic year.
And I'm going to have Tim, our transportation coordinator, present, and you'll see that he expanded the different ways that he was looking at adding to the fleet, and I'll let him explain the differences.
This year, I've got bids on 2 diesel school buses and 2 gas buses. I was really looking into this last year and put it off, and kind of regret that now, because this past year we've spent more money on diesel exhaust fluid repairs than I would have ever imagined. A lot of that has to do with we've had these vehicles long enough now where we're starting to have these replacement problems and so on and so forth. Very expensive. Gas buses, they've improved these a lot. They are not the transit style bus, but I think we'll be fine with the conventional style. I know the mechanics absolutely prefer that 100% over a conventional. So the price of the bus that we bought last year is about $13,500 higher this year if we were to go like with the diesel. But at this time, I'm recommending that we go with a 71 passenger Bluebird Vision gas bus. This bus is a little bit higher than the International, but this bus has a Ford engine in it. The International has a PSI, and we don't have anybody close by here that would be working on any warranty with the Ford engine. We could go right out to Ellsworth. Other than that, most of these buses are pretty identical. You write your own specs, and they build your bus to your specs. So at this time, I will recommend that we go with the Bluebird Vision 71 passenger gas.
Thanks, Tim.
Yep.
Steve, do you have any questions for Tim?
I don't.
All right, Vicky?
I don't.
Tanya?
Tim, can you remind me, last year, did we buy a bus? Was it diesel last year?
Yes, we've never not bought a diesel bus in the 27 years I've been here.
Yeah.
And before I got here, I believe 3/4 of our fleet was diesel.
Okay, great. No other questions.
Pat, any questions?
You explained why you didn't go with the international. That makes sense. I'm sure you don't have the information right now, but maybe sometime down the road here, are there any other diesel buses that are currently in the fleet right now that you anticipate, major, costs associated with the emissions and some of the things you've already cited that
we
need to get out ahead of?
We have 2012 to 2022. So we've got 10 buses in our fleet that are set up with the diesel exhaust fluid. Of them 10, 8 of them have already received maintenance.
Okay.
Most of them under warranty, which I don't like because you shouldn't have to. To me, tells me it's not working properly, because if it's still that new and we're having a lot of trouble with it, we actually had a technician in Monday to redo DEF system on a bus that we bought 2 years ago. So to me, it's like there's just way less issues with gas. I've been told there's practically 600-700 lights that will not be coming on if you get away from this exhaust system problem that we've got going with the gas. So it's much cheaper. You're not going to get quite as good fuel mileage, but from what I can see, the expense that we're incurring on maintenance and buying the DEF itself, I think it's still going to be cheaper for us to run.
Thank you.
I had another question real quick, which Tim, it was a handful of years ago, and we deferred buying a bus for, I believe it was 1 year. We normally buy a bus every year. Do you see any issues or maintenance needs coming from kind of that 1 year when we tried to save money with that busing fleet?
Not at this time. That hasn't been the cause of any problem. We did end up, because of the budget, purchasing that bus in that school year budget, but after school was finishing.
Right. Okay.
So we did actually purchase a bus that year. We did not get rid of one. And again, last year, before we knew what was going to happen, when we bought a new bus, I did not get rid of one because we weren't sure if we were going to have to add more routes with the COVID system. So this year, we got rid of 2 of the real old ones, the
Gotcha.
1999 models.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah.
Shay, any questions here?
No questions.
All right, Tim, do you think this is a trend that we're going to be looking at in the future too?
Yeah. Another reason for this Bluebird Safeway bus up in Somerset. Safeway is a huge company, and they're in Somerset, Hudson. They're on their 3rd year in a row of buying this same bus. So that makes me believe they're really happy with it. If you're going to start buying 30, 40 buses every year of that same bus.
Okay. All right, thanks, Tim. We can consider a motion here, board.
I can take a shot at here. I move to accept the bid from Wisconsin Bus Sales for the Bluebird BBC V Vision gasoline bus. Oh, maybe I messed that up, Mike. For the purchase of one new yellow bus to be added to the fleet to next academic school year.
I'll second that.
So we have the Bluebird BBC Vision gasoline bus, and it's listed at 95, 970. That's what we're.
Correct.
So we're good there with that motion in a second. Any changes? All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That carries. Move on to item G. Consider the extension of the 4K community agreements with Hard Hands in Mind Childcare, New Adventures Learning Center, and St. Joseph Parish School.
Correct. As you know, 4K programming has been part of the Prescott Public Schools since it was allowed within the state. We have great community partnerships. It is the end of our 3-year agreement, and we are looking at extending that 3-year agreement. Those contracts were sent out to all 3 of the sites. At this time, we're proposing that the same rate of reimbursement would stay static until the next biennium budget, as the Prescott Public Schools has not received any increase per pupil from Wisconsin legislature.
Vicki, do you have any questions on this one?
No, I don't.
All right, Steve?
Nope, I'm good, thanks.
Tanya?
So this is the same reimbursement rate as our previous contract?
Correct.
And if we do get an increase, are we gonna come back and look at this, or are we gonna, is
Right,
this?
yeah, so we have kind of an asterisk or a footnote on it that we would meet with them. If we get an increase, we would come back to you to make an adjustment.
And were there, it sounds like you already presented this contract to our centers. Were there any questions or things that we need to discuss coming from them?
Yeah, I'm looking at Katie because I had Katie send them out. She's telling me that we did not get any feedback.
Okay, great, thank you.
All right, Pat?
No, Tanya hit on them. Just, I guess before we move to approve these extensions, I mean, if you guys feel like they've had adequate time to respond with any feedback, I mean, we don't think we're
Yeah, I think for a couple of them, they were actually asking us to kind of accelerate. They have boards as well and need to have kind of contracts in place to guarantee, you know, that they'll have this funding.
So this isn't a surprise? This is
Correct.
Okay, all
Yep.
right, thank you.
Not a surprise, thank you.
All right, good questions. Shay, anything from her?
No.
All right, we can consider a motion.
I move to approve the extension of the 4K community agreements with the following sites: Heart, Hands in Mind, Childcare, New Adventures Learning Center, and St. Joseph Parish School for the next 3 academic years.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That carries. All right, we are on to item H. Consider the initial resolution authorizing general obligation bonds in an amount not to exceed 15 million.
Yes, so just to kind of cue this up for our community and then to turn it over to all of you. As you know, we had a special work session on December 1st and then also a regular board meeting. At that time, you did move forward both with the date and the amount. However, you did have some wordsmithing that you did with regards to what would be presented on the ballot, and so that went back to Quarles and Brady, and then also all the documentation. So it is now here for the official resolutions. If you do pass it, then it first would be for the amount, and then the second resolution is required to direct the clerk to submit the resolution to the electorate to vote on April 5th, 2022.
Steve, do you have any questions on this one? Comments?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just reiterate what we talked about 2 weeks ago. You know, with this moving forward, I'm dedicated to supporting it from the standpoint that I know the buildings need the work. I'm still going to continue to vote no for this. You know, and I mentioned this in February when the board decided to move grade 3 to Malone Elementary. That I didn't agree with that because I want to understand what the plan is moving forward. And I know some folks talk about what's hard to figure out a plan because we don't know what's going to happen, people moving into town, houses being built. I understand all that, and we've got to be able to be flexible, but we also have to illustrate the fact that we have a vision of what's going to happen with these 4 buildings. And I think the community wants that as confirmation so that if we're going to stay with 4, they understand basically what they're going to be used for. Because, you know, rumors swirl, and, you know, I just think that clarity of information is important. Regardless, the buildings have needs. There's no question about that. I'll go back to my analogy of a car a little bit. You know, if you're going to keep a car for a couple more months, you're not going to put much money into it. If you're going to keep it for the next 5 years, you're going to put some money into it. And I focus that on the middle school because that's the one building that comes up in many questions. You know, if we're not going to have it in 3 years for whatever reason, why would we dump a bunch of money into it? And I know the districts, we've talked for years about staying a 4-building district, and that's kind of been our dedication. But again, I think a plan helps people understand that commitment and at least the direction that we plan to go. So I don't know that I need to add anything else to that. That's kind of where I'm at, and that's where I was 2 weeks ago. So I'll just listen to the rest of the discussion. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Steve. Pat, do you want to go next?
Sure. Sorry, I maybe got a long one here, but I think one of the school board's main functions here is we're tasked to evaluate, recommend strategies to maintain our district and community-owned assets, creating and maintaining safe and appropriate spaces for our students and staff to teach and learn while being stewards of our taxpayer dollars requires maintenance and upkeep of our facilities. The kind of generational capital investments required to maintain our facilities from time to time are simply not able to be saved for by Wisconsin public schools. These investments require either borrowing, donations, or cuts to programming, services, and staff. Mike Hoyka and our administration, I think, have done an admirable job of developing forward-thinking strategies and have identified both immediate and long-range needs to keep our facilities safe and functional while working to eliminate costly reactive measures to facility needs. These same strategies have been reviewed and validated by SDS architects, Market and Johnson, and also as the board have engaged in many open meeting workshops to listen and ask questions regarding these needs, funding options, and tax implications. A facility advisory group was formed consisting of a diverse cross-section from our community to put forth recommendations on the proposed maintenance needs. Multiple facility advisory committee members have been in attendance at each board meeting and workshop since the committee was formed, and the recommendations from the 11-person group have been 90% in agreement. There's been discussion of potential lack of a master plan and comfort levels around supporting a referendum not tied to one. And I do, Steve, I do understand and I do respect your opinion on this. Me as an individual who probably has been more outspoken than most around the need for this master plan, I think this is slightly inaccurate and unfair. While it is true that we have not yet finalized a comprehensive building and green space master plan, long-range planning to maintain our 4 buildings has been supported and has been supported by the past public community survey that was sent out this last year, has been discussed and taken into account during open board workshops, meetings, and facility advisory committees. This referendum that we're talking about now is about maintaining current existing assets needed to operate over the next handful of years. This is a step necessary to allow this comprehensive master plan to be formed and evaluated. Sorry, I know this is long. There is also current concern over how maintaining our facilities is in potential conflict of what may be happening inside of the building walls. I personally believe that as a taxpayer, you need to decouple the two and feel that maintaining our current investments is critical. As an ambassador for our students and our staff, having a safe, comfortable space to teach and learn is just as critical. At, and I'll put this in quotes, at zero impact to existing property tax scenarios, we get the opportunity to accomplish both. There's my comments.
All right, thanks, Pat. Vicki, did you have any comments?
I agree with a lot of what Pat said. That's how I feel, having attended these meetings and attended the workshops that we've had. In order to move forward with a master plan, I feel like Pat feels we have to separate that. We have to figure out, and we have to keep our buildings in working order in order to move forward. Once we accomplish that, then I think that's where, and we've asked for it before. I know Steve had mentioned it before too, about getting the community input in some sort of master plan involving everyone. And I feel we need to do that. But we have to have our buildings in working order. And I think we are in the best position right now at zero extra cost to the taxpayers. I think now is the best time to do this, get our buildings in working order and maintain those so that we can move forward. And we we are lucky, we have 4 buildings. We just need to keep them working, and then we can figure out how we're going to move forward with this master plan for the district.
Thanks, Vicki. Tanya, any questions or comments?
Yeah, Pat, I think you did an awesome job just really kind of outlining some of the process that we've gone through, talking about reasons why it's important for us to commit to these buildings and continue to commit to them. I agree fully with you. I just wanted to point out a couple of things, right? We have 4 buildings right now. We, as part of the survey, did ask our community about what opinions on going down to 3 buildings versus 4 buildings. Community was very clear that they wanted to maintain 4 buildings. We as a school board have committed during many work sessions that we are a 4-building district. It might look different. We don't have that master planning done, but we know that we're committed to keeping those 4 buildings. And in order to work towards that master plan, we really need to make sure that our investments are maintained so we can include them as part of our master planning. So I am fully committed to supporting this referendum. It's our district, although no school district is able to save this kind of money in at least Wisconsin with how funding is done. We have been very purposeful about creating new savings accounts that are just for projects like this. We've worked on our bond rating and all kinds of things in order for us to get to a place where we can ask for a $15 million bond increase or amount from our community at a 0 cost. I think that this puts us, although not saved for all that money, it puts us in a really great position to be able to move forward with asking for this and put our community in the best place to have the least amount of impact on them financially. I also really think it's important for us to remember that we've been planning this for years. This was not something that was haphazard. We've been working with SDS and Market and Johnson, as well as our own staff, working towards what needs to happen. And the things that we've decided, and really many of this has come from us as a school board, and then I would really say that the facilities advisory group really, to me, reaffirmed that we were headed in the right direction with thinking of what needed to happen. But as a reminder, we are doing basics. We're not reconfiguring classrooms. We're not trading spaces. We're not making the middle school into an elementary building. None of that stuff is happening. We're looking at the maintenance of our buildings in order to keep them functioning. The configuration and all that stuff, the long-term planning, that's down the road, and probably, that's something that also within a district is fluid and changes. So I'm fully committed to the 4 buildings. I think that this is a needed referendum at this point. So that's all I have.
All right, and Tanya, I just wanted a quick point of clarification on the 0 tax and what
increase.
Yeah, so it's just to be clear, right? It's we would put it at a 0 tax increase, right? That's how. Is that a polite way of saying your taxes will not increase? I just want to make sure it doesn't come at no cost, but the way the mill rate would not be.
Absolutely. Sorry if I was not clear.
I want to make sure we're being transparent there.
Yep.
All my comments line up. You guys did a fantastic job of basically rationalizing why this referendum is a must. It's a critical need for us. I try to separate the two. It's hard to have a master plan if our buildings are falling apart, and we have to maintain the facilities that we have. That's really what it boils down for me as well. It's maintain the facilities that you have, and then we have flexibility at that point. Whether the middle school becomes something different down the road, that's an option. But without this money, we start cutting into our bottom line to make fixes to areas of these buildings that would otherwise be used for programming or other things. And that's the big concern, and that's the big ask that we have for the community is for supporting it. And again, the Facilities Advisory Committee, they did a lot of work to go through and make sure that what we're asking for is needed, it's appropriate. Mike Hoyka's stamp of approval means a ton to me. I think whenever if he signs off on something, I take Mike's word as, that's a lot of merit in my opinion. So Mike spent a lot of time on this. And then as a board, we've been at this for, it's close to 3 years if you really want to go back to the point where we asked SDS to come on and start doing the analysis in all the buildings. So we've been at this for 3 years, and it's not something that has been done in a hurry or in a rush. We've done extensive analysis. We've had extensive discussions. We've asked for public input. We've had a committee, like I just said. So I feel this board has done an enormous amount of work to prepare for this referendum that we're looking at in April. And absolutely appropriate, and I appreciate all the work that everybody's done. Steve, I appreciate your comments as well, Steve. I don't want that to go unnoticed again. And I know you said that you would support the referendum. I think that's really important to call out as well. Steve supports the referendum. I think there's just a few things maybe with the middle school that he disagrees with, and that's fine. We're a board of 5 people, and we have 5 equal votes on this board. And that's as clear as you can put it. So I think, is there any other comments that anybody else has here from the board?
Well, I mean, I just want to clarify that my issue is not just with the middle school. And again, this isn't the first time I've brought this up regarding what we're doing with this district, and it probably won't be the last time, but I do support, if we move forward with this referendum, I support it in the respect that, I agree with Pat and everyone else on the board. The buildings have needs, all right? I think that's plain and simple. The district's going to have to find the money at some point to pay for it. I just think more work needs to be done from a long-term perspective, but I don't disagree. The buildings have needs.
All right. Thanks, Steve. Shay, did you have anything you want to jump in here on?
I just have a quick question. This 15 million, sorry, I wasn't at the workshop, but that 15 million, I'm just curious, where that came from. Is that from that, survey that you guys took from the community a couple of years ago, or was that kind of just a random number?
So the Facilities Advisory Committee came up with 3 options, and this was the most preferred option based on a number of different factors that went into that.
Okay.
And so the facilities came to us with the 3 options, and we're basically saying we trust the Facilities Advisory Committee did their job, followed a process, and we want to move forward with it.
Okay, perfect.
Shay, what a great question. And something else, just a note, and this is something that I learned as a board member, is that we're asking it not to exceed 15 million. So if the things that we need to come in a little bit less, then that's what's reflected. It's just that we can't go over that amount.
Yeah. Yeah, and I just want to say that I think this is great. I mean, going through the schools before this high school, obviously they're not as nice as this brand new building, so I think this is great that we're thinking about this.
All right. At this point, I think we can consider a motion.
I move to approve the initial resolution authorizing the general obligation bonds in an amount not to exceed $15 million as written, reviewed, and presented.
I'll second.
Vicki, second. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. One last round here. Is there any further dialogue or comments? All right. All in favor, let's do a roll call. Let's do a roll call. Pat?
Aye.
Tanya?
Aye.
Steve?
Nay.
Vicki?
Aye.
I am an aye as well. The motion carries. Thank you. And we'll move on to item I, consider the resolution providing for a referendum election on the question of the approval of the initial resolution, the issuance of general obligation bonds in an amount not to exceed 15 million.
So basically, the nuance here is that you're now specifying that the clerk would notify Pierce County that you're going to move forward with this on the election of April 5th, 2022, to allow the community to approve or not approve this sale of bonds.
Tanya, do you have any questions on this one? Does it make sense?
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. I have questions on how we present it because we have the question, which we worked on at our work session, then we asked our lawyers to kind of look at it again, and now it's presented again. And it says in here that per our lawyers that we don't need to read the whole thing. We can kind of read the abbreviated. Do we want to do that now?
Well, that was a discussion item I did want to bring up. So
Yeah.
I think it's really our option. If we want to read the whole resolution,
Yeah.
we can. Legally, we do not have to. So I wanted to pose it to you, to the board, to see which direction you wanted to go. From a legal perspective, it's the same. Some boards like to read the whole resolution, others maybe don't.
And if we read the whole thing, which I'm fine with. Is it pretty, so I see this question here. That's the part that we can read the whole, I think we can just read the whole thing.
No, that's the one that was up previously that you have is what you voted on first. And so the next one is
like
multiple pages. Basically, it's directing, my recommendation is you had kind of the language and the amount, and now it really is just saying that you want this question that's above us, and that Corals and Brady helped you solidify to be put forward for the electorate to vote on April 5th, 2022.
Yeah, and this is the part that we worked on at our work session.
Correct.
So I think that's appropriate to read.
I do too.
Katie, did you have?
So I have this, but there's also links in the, if you want to go to the full referendum, or the. When does it go to the red light? Full motion.
Okay. Couple pages, yeah.
You gotta go to item I, and then.
I did.
Can I just read it? I mean, does it have to be part of the resolution, or can I just read it?
Before we do that, let's just go around the horn quick. Pat, did you have anything that you wanted to?
No.
No. Steve?
I don't, thanks.
Okay. Vicky?
No.
Shay?
No.
All right. Yeah. And again, this is every time we go to a referendum, there's two resolutions we got to make. One for the amount, and then one to actually go to the public to ask for that amount, right?
Correct.
That's what we're on right now.
Exactly.
Does the board, anybody have any suggestions? I could add my 2 cents, but I usually am outnumbered, so I'll ask the other board members if you have a strong preference one way or another. This resolution is over a page. It's almost 2 pages long.
And there's a small synopsis for you where it just starts whereas on number 2.
So we'll have to read that whole thing. And again, the other option is to approve a referendum election on the question of the approval of the initial resolution and issuance of general obligation bonds in an amount not to exceed 15 million.
Mike, is this right here, that referendum, that's the referendum question that will be on the ballot, is that correct?
Correct.
Not the 2 pages, right?
Correct.
That's what we just
So,
approved.
yeah, right, so,
This part is just
That's-
dictating the date.
Right.
Because you've approved the amount, now you gotta specify the date and that you're asking the clerk to send that to Pierce County
okay.
to get on a
I mean,
ballot.
I think we're kind of getting hung up in schematics here, but it's, again, I don't want to be the only one that thinks that. Do you care?
No.
Steve or Vicky, any strong objections if we just read the abbreviated motion to approve the referendum election? Well, let's just make a motion here, and then we'll go with it. And if it, so.
So I have,
Go ahead, Vicki.
I have a question. So the 2-page, 2-page document, there we go. Is that available so that I mean, we know what it is. Is it available so that everybody else can see it, so that we can do the abbreviated resolution here?
It will be available. It's available as part of the documentation with the agenda, and I assume we'll be throwing this out on our website.
Yep.
For the public.
So I have it up on the screen, so it has, kind of the.
Again, this is just to approve
Getting it on the ballot.
getting it on a ballot.
I guess I'm okay with doing the abbreviated as long as it is available so that everybody who wants to see how it reads in the entirety can see it, I guess.
Okay. Well, then we can consider a motion here.
All right, I move to approve a referendum election on the question of the approval of an initial resolution and issuance of general obligation bonds in an amount not to exceed $15 million.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion? All right, we'll do a roll call. Pat?
Aye.
Vicky?
Aye.
Tanya, sorry.
It's okay, aye.
And Steve?
Nay.
I'm an aye as well. That motion carries. Thank you to the board, and thank you for everybody that has put in an enormous amount of time getting us to this point. Your time and effort is sincerely appreciated. I really mean that.
I want to just thank once again the facilities committee. I know they put in way more work than I anticipated, I think, than we kind of pitched to them. And for me, their recommendation was really important. So thank you.
Yeah.
I see some of the people are here today, which is great.
All right, we'll move on. Item J, consider acceptance of the Clifton Larson Allen audit for the 2020-21 fiscal year.
Yes, so every year, every school district must go through an external audit. We have hired Clifton Larson Allen to conduct that. The key findings, you have the full audit, and just to be clear, we continue to have strong financial health of the district and balanced budgets. That also provides us with an incredible Moody rating that when you do go out for bonds like you just approved, that's your credit score, which also helps the taxpayers with regards to getting better interest rates. As you'll see on page 8, the general fund balance increased, so obviously there was additional money that was been able to be set aside, and then that was also allocated to Fund 46 for future capital expenses that will outstrip the $15 million that we're moving forward for the electorate to vote on. Your post-retirement benefits have decreased, and that's important for us because we pay as we go. And so as those post-retirement benefits, you can see, have decreased over almost $300,000, that is $300,000 that's going back into educational programming, that's going back into salaries for our staff. There were areas that were identified for improvement. This is a consistent finding for small districts, and that is that we have limited staff. And what happens when you have limited staff is that it's very difficult to have segregation of duties. That creates a liability to some degree with regards to executing orders all the way through. However, we do and are working on making sure that we have different agencies coming in. We have CISA and Baird that have been helping us since the annual meeting this fall and then in October, and I'm pretty confident that we're in a good place. We also were identified, however, that we do have some teachers with non-valid licenses, specifically in special education, and that's a twofold because it's not just the variants that didn't get published or sought, but we do get reimbursed for the different licensures. So rather than some states that reimburse for special education students, we're reimbursed for the number of counselors that we have, the school psychologists, and the special education teachers. So if we don't have the license, we then are not reimbursed for that individual. And as you know, special education staff tend to be higher on the scale. So that's both a financial and also an educational piece. The action steps that we've taken since then, the board did approve for the district office to hire another 1.0 FTE. That has been put forward, and we're now are working on trying to create additional segregation of duties and cross-train for redundancies. And during this time where it's very thin, and sometimes with COVID, it's important that we do have cross-training. On the last item, our HR department, special education, and payroll, because it hit all three, are working on a workflow process to ensure that the licensure at the time of hire is in place or the appropriate variance is selected. So overall, as you know, we've had a strong history over the last multiple years, and there were no surprises with regards to this external audit once again.
All right. Tanya, did you have any questions for Rick or comments?
It's so weird being in a thunderstorm in here in December, but no, we see this every time, the limited size. We did increase 1.0 in part because of just trying to have a big part was just a better work balance for our staff in the office. It is hard being a small district, and so we have seen that every time I've been on the board, I think that first bullet has been part of our audit. The second one is new to me, though. I don't recall seeing that before, and I know that there's some teacher shortages, and we're trying to get teachers in place, and I'm hoping that this is not a tradition that we stick with, and I see that we've got some steps there to help us out with that. So. Nope, nothing too surprising here at all.
Pat?
No questions right now.
Steve, any questions or comments?
I don't have anything additional right now, thanks.
Vicki?
So with the second bullet point about the teachers with non-valid license for special education, is that then why we saw for instruction, we saw an increase there that we weren't expecting?
Can you?
Because we didn't get the reimbursement for that?
I think our balance increased.
Is that what it was? Okay.
Yeah. So no. The fund balance. They're two separate issues, but it's more of just a concern that we want to make sure that at the time of hire we have to submit for reimbursement. For special education teachers, we are at risk of losing money when that isn't in sync. And so we are going to make sure that the variance is required or the appropriate license is in hand.
Okay, thank you.
Shay, any questions on this one?
No.
One for me, Rick, the general fund balance has increased to 5.9, which is great. Sorry to put you on the spot, but we have a policy about trying to keep a range in our general fund. Is that close to the ceiling at that point, or?
Exactly. Yeah, we have finally hit a place where it was a three-legged stool. We wanted to make sure that we eliminated short-term borrowing, and that has been now in place for the last 3 years. We wanted to make sure that, and that was a consistent time where we had to take out that line of credit. The way that we're funded, remember, we are still starting expenses July 1, but we don't receive all of our accrual payments from the state and federal government until June 30th. So we now have enough money basically to cover those lean months. We wanted to make sure that we were able to, if there were emergencies and some of the things that happen when you have older buildings, and this year Mike has run into where I think we had, was it 3 boilers went out or 2? Two. So we had 2 boilers went out, and those are quite expensive. And so those are things that sometimes go above and beyond what would have been in the budget. So we have hit all 3 standards, and so now the money that we have, is being invested back into salaries and programs.
All right. Thank you. We will consider a motion here.
I move to accept the audit from Clifton Larson Allen for the 2020-2021 fiscal year.
I'll second that.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that one carries. Thank you. That ends business. We're on information and discussion. First item is the superintendent and administrative team proposal to create a weekly 2-hour early release on Monday starting January 24th till the end of the school year.
Yeah, I'm gonna kind of just tee this up and share a little bit about how information comes forward within our system and making sure that as we team with our staff, that we have certain processes and individuals that are identified as what we call professional learning communities. Each grade level at the elementary and every content level has a representative. Those individuals meet on a monthly basis under the guidance of Michael Kosmowski with teaching and learning. And that's a K-12 endeavor. Those are things that we're looking at from a continuous improvement to identify how we use assessment data, our instructional practices, technology, and the way that we collaborate and work not only on the academic levels of students, but also their social, emotional, and physical health. In addition, they meet with their own teams at every grade within the week and sometimes across multiple times with special education and now our interventionists. Those individuals also then have 3 touch points with the superintendent, teaching and learning, and special education, where we review all of the test scores and in the month of August are working on data digs and setting up goals around our continuous improvement related to some of our cards that we have identified around academics and engagement. Next, we then set those goals and review that information. And so it is a collaborative, ongoing process where information comes forward. I can tell you that COVID is very difficult on our staff, and it's very difficult and enduring for our families. And there's not many things that we can do to relieve that burden. We are like every other agency and organization where we are thin-staffed. We have people that are stepping up, working overtime. We have individuals that are giving up their prep. And it has been brought, and when I meet with the teachers, there is a serious concern about whether or not they can continue to perform at the levels that we expect as a community to perform. And this is an option that my administrative team would like to present to you as they are closer to the classroom, closer to our teachers, and I would like them to walk you through this proposal. And you heard very articulate presentations in the opening comments about different perspectives of how that plays out. So I will start with Michael Kosmowski, and each of the administrators are available to add their perspective as well.
Thank you, Dr. Spikuza. Just want to resound what Dr. Spikuza talked about is that, again, student services, teaching and learning, Dr. Spikuza, multiple times throughout the year we go and visit with our sites. We talk to the building leadership teams. And of the sites we spoke to over the last 2 months, it's been resoundingly loud and clear of what the needs are at our buildings is time. It's the most valuable thing in education is our time. And when our staff and our teacher leaders talked about time, they didn't talk about time to prep and grade. What they talked about was time to learn from each other, to work interdependently, to move our district towards the goals that they have set upon themselves as buildings, and again, to meet that vision that I'm going to try to lay out for you today that we've been working on over the last 4 years. Part of that process, we do look at our results, we look at our gaps, we look at our deficiencies, and we look at our celebrations. From those gaps and the gaps that we knew were there from COVID, we have added, thankfully to the board, some intervention positions for K-8. Corey Morning in mathematics, Amy Figge down at the elementary level. But one of the issues that we've talked about, and it's not just our interventionists, it's also our special education teachers, our counselors and school psychs, our specials teachers down at the elementary, so STEM, media, art, music, is that the structure and the way that we do school right now does not allow them to collaborate and to learn from each other. And that's really what the time is that our teachers are asking for. They've asked that of us as the administrative team, and they've brought that forward to Dr. Sakuza as well in those meetings. We know that both students and staff all require support. We are aware of the potential hardships this puts on families, much like last year when we implemented this back in October at the K-5 level. At that time, we did have families weigh in about the potential obstacles. We'll talk about some of those and how do we remove some of those. But 8% of our families said that this would be an obstacle for them, and we worked with them to remove those obstacles. And it was a very successful model that we had last year. As you heard earlier in the good news, that under that model at the elementary and intermediate school, we're able to keep academic achievement at a high level, top 15% in the state of Wisconsin. We also were able to focus on the needs of all learners and to grow all learners and to be in the top 3% in the state of Wisconsin in growth of our students is no easy feat. The staff at the intermediate school, when we met with them, they contributed a lot of that growth to the overhaul of our intervention system and our intervention approach, partially because of more interventionists, but also having our most needy students work with our most certified staff, our teachers. However, that comes with time needed for collaboration, and the early Monday outs allowed for that time. 4 years ago, when I was in teaching and learning, we took a leadership team to a conference. And it was a solution tree run by the DeFores, high names in education. And we talked about these 4 schools of learning. This is something that came out of that conference, and we posed this to initially to our PLC leadership team, and then to our whole staff. And we had 100 and some odd educators in here, and I had them weigh in, and they voted. And a couple of things we talked about is we talked first about just the models and what are they, and how has this progressed in education over the years. So, and we call them schools A through school D. So school A is where learning was based on your ability. And school B, very similar, is that we believe that students can learn, but it's up to them to take advantage of those opportunities. School C is where students can learn something. We're going to create that safe learning environment for them to learn in. And then there's school D, where we believe all students can learn at high levels, and we'll do whatever it takes to ensure that that occurs. And then we did some surveys, and we talked about what were our experiences. Probably similar to many of the experiences of the people that are here today. Which school did we attend? Which school do we believe we worked at? And then, where did we want to work at, and where do we want to see our kids and grandkids go to school? And as you can see from that survey of nearly 100% of our staff at the time, is that everyone agrees we want to work at a school and have our children attend a school district where we guarantee learning for all. And all means all. Not just the highest achieving students, but even that lowest 25%. And again, as you heard earlier, we are in the 92nd percentile, our top 8% in the state for those lowest kids as well. School D is a shared leadership vision. It's about communication, it's about interdependency, it's about having a vision. There's a little graphic on the right-hand side, and it talks about teaching and learning in schools A and B, where you have the curriculum that gets filtered through the teacher and then delivered to students. In schools D, the curriculum is at the center, and around that, and you can see this interdependent woven web of relating to the teacher, to the students, back to the curriculum, back to other students, where we are interdependently in our classrooms learning from each other. So that's the model over the last 4 years as a PLC leadership district team, we've been working on. We've been working on defining what does that mean and what does that look like. I'll share a little bit more about that in a few minutes, but Mr. Figge is going to join me at the mic and talk a little bit more about what are some of those educational changes that he's seeing at the secondary level and as our system as a whole.
Good evening again. I had the privilege last week of holding a staff meeting and having a majority of our staff in the same room. And it was toward the end of a week, and I just asked for a poll based on some of the things I was hearing even from our students. And I just asked, how many of you are experiencing the toughest year you've ever had in education? And well over 90% of our teachers raised their hand. We have teachers who've been teaching for over 30 years, and we have teachers who this is their first year in education. But a majority of them agreed on one thing, despite very, very different content areas and very, very different experiences. And I guess as we're looking at changes in education over the past 2 years, over the past 5 years, but especially that have been accelerated and augmented over the past year, the one word that comes to my mind is complexity. As you look up at the slide, you can see that a number of different things have been added in. A plethora of new things that not only teachers are having to learn, figure out how to best implement and manage for students, but also students are having to do the same things. And I know our school board members here who have kids in the district and at the secondary level know the complexity of trying to manage the digital side of things, the curriculum side of things, the gradebook side of things. It is not an easy thing for a parent, kids, for teachers. So that word complexity comes into play. We were very blessed last year to get our one-to-one initiative. It's been great for a lot of our students, for a majority of our students who had never had access to those sorts of resources before. It has opened up new horizons for our teachers and classes, but with that has come more complexity in class, shifting over curriculum, shifting over instructional practices, kids learning how to manage a device full-time in very, very different ways. You can see some of the bullet points at the bottom there get right to instructional practices. And it dovetails really well with what Mr. Kosmolsky was talking about with School D. Individualized learning for kids, getting away from the one-size-fits-all, making sure that we're focused on accountability for the students, and when they're not meeting the standards that mom and dad or that we're setting out for them, trying to respond in really, really quick, intervention-based ways. And then lastly, focused on student safety, the physical, social, and emotional side. And we'll get into this in a little bit, but one of the things that I think that every single teacher, every single staff member, our counselors, our school psych, the administrators in the room, and probably a lot of parents would report is we are seeing an uptick in student mental health issues. We're seeing an uptick in student behavior issues this year. I think you can look at just about any publication, they're going to report both of those things. And those are things that we want to work with, but we need time to do those things. So we're seeing some massive shifts. And a lot of these are solvable, but we need more time to collaborate with our teaching staff, and our teachers need more time to look at solutions. Where has collaboration time gone? Our teachers are seeing less and less of it. You can see at the elementary and intermediate level, our teachers are essentially supervising students straight through their contract time, from 7:30 in the morning with students taking breakfast in the room, lunchtime supervision, bus and pickup duty after school, and it leaves them about 15 minutes at the end of their day to try and wrap up a classroom. At the secondary level, we're having teachers pull in students for interventions all the time, trying to meet with students. We have students, and it's one thing that I'll touch on later, but to date we've had 174 students at the high school level who have been out for vacations, for medical reasons, for mental health treatment, for COVID testing or COVID positive testing. And each one of these students we're trying to provide some sort of education for in a way that's very, very different than the students that are in the room. In a lot of cases, this is taking away the collaboration time of teachers. And then you can see even still trying to disinfect spaces, still trying to provide that safe space for students. One last thing is a reminder that pre-COVID, at least at the high school level, we had an early out day every Wednesday that was a 45-minute early release so that our teachers could meet with their PLCs and work towards the 4 main questions in education. After that marched in 2020, thank you. With our new schedule, we got rid of that because we wanted to be able to meet more with our students. We adopted that new schedule. But right now, all of our teams are trying to meet outside of schools, before school, after school, and meet the needs of our students. We tried to pull some numbers together because I think numbers have power. And I'll be very honest, I think numbers to me are extremely important because I can be quantitative with you, but I also want to speak what I'm seeing day to day and what I'm hearing day to day from not only teachers but also students. I had 2 students in my office today, and we were reflecting on how the day was going for them, and they said, well, I'm really stressed, and I can tell my teachers are stressed. And I saw my teacher crying today. And as we dug into it, this student, this sophomore, recognized that his teacher was getting burnt out. And to me, that's really, really powerful. I don't have social media, but I know enough people who monitor social media and send me things. And I know there's a narrative out there right now that teachers don't need this, teachers don't want this. And what I would ask you to do is, if you're in that pool, talk to a teacher or call me, and I'll help walk you through some of these things. We are not unique. We're not unique in Wisconsin. We're not unique in the nation or even internationally. There's a massive, massive staff shortage, and there's an even more massive subs shortage. And that is not, we have not been safe from that. So what you're seeing here is the quantitative report about how we have had to cover shortages in classrooms. And what I will tell you is at the secondary level and at the elementary level, our teachers are awesome because everything we do is for our students, and so they step up every single time to fill a classroom. Sometimes I have multiple teachers who are wanting to fill a classroom, but every time they do that, it's taking away from their time to provide feedback for their students, provide interventions for their students, collaborate, get their grading done, so those things get pushed to different places. And I might be jumping the slideshow here, I apologize. But later in the slideshow, you're gonna, yeah.
Can I, just so I read this right, this chart?
Yep.
The number of internal coverage instances, that's basically 59 times in the month of September. We had to have somebody else cover somebody's room or whatever.
Correct.
Is that right? So that's almost 3 times a day, basically. That's close to 3 times a day that happens.
It depends on the level, but if it's by period or if it's by afternoon or morning, what it is showing you is that every single day in September, in October, in November, and December,
yeah.
we had someone out that we couldn't cover.
In October, it's like that's 5 times a day if I'm doing it right. I mean, so you're constantly, what the narrative you're saying is you're constantly covering for each other.
Yeah,
because
correct.
of outage or lack of staff or whatever.
Yep.
Okay.
And Josh, I'm
Yes.
going to put you on the spot. I know that Mr. Igo wasn't able to be here as well, but could you just share, it's not just your teachers that are giving up their prep. From your administrative team, how often are you and Mr. Igo covering classes as well?
I had to go back and compile the days. 45 days this year, I've covered at least 1 or multiple classes. Mr. Igo has covered 27, at least partial days, if not full days.
And we're on currently, as of tomorrow, I think, 77 days into the school year.
Yeah. And I didn't take into account counselors as well. So I think we spoke in a previous board meeting about the ramifications, how often can we stay open, and we're trying to do that in any way possible, but certain services get curtailed or shut down for our students. So I'm going to take a step back and let Mr. Anyway speak about the special ed impact.
Thank you, Mr. Figge. Just wanted to briefly talk about special ed as well. These are some numbers, and these are really kind of holistic numbers across our district. But as you know, students with disabilities and special education needs are sometimes complicated. They do require, the involvement of not just a single person. No individual person can meet the needs of students who have, complicated mental health or learning or behavioral needs. So it does require a lot of collaboration, a lot of working together. Even this morning, I had, I think, 4 of our middle school special education teachers brave the fog to meet at 7 o'clock with me to discuss various student needs and meet as a PLC. Now, again, those kind of things will continue to happen, but I think it's important that we have more than just that half an hour to kind of cram in the morning when kids are, running down the hallways and we're getting interrupted. So I do feel like this is a very important thing for our teachers. When you look at the number of special education teacher positions that have gone unfilled this year, I think we have had 61 days where at least one special education teacher was out without a sub. We've had 62 days in which at least one teacher assistant is out without a sub, and that's not even including the 2 unfilled special education teacher assistant positions we've had all year. And so each of those occasions requires teachers to double up, teacher assistants to double up so that they're meeting those student needs. We don't simply just say, oh, well, we're just canceling special ed for the day. We don't do that. Our teachers fill in, our administrators fill in, our school psychologists and counselors fill in to meet those needs. So again, as Mr. Figge said, our students are getting more complicated. It's not a single teacher that can meet those needs, and that's why that collaboration is so very important.
The only part I'd like to add specifically from the intermediate site is, as much as I would love, and I believe everyone would love for COVID to be done with us, it's not. Last year, there were 9 COVID cases at the intermediate school that I had to send out messages to families, contact trace, who's been in close proximity, what teams are they on, PCR, things like that. Yesterday, I sent my 34th case, and all of last year was 9. And those cases take hours to process through, every single one. So on top of all the other part is, just trying to meet the needs of our students, and I think Mr. Figge alluded to this, but students that are not on site, our model has changed. 10 years ago, when I was young in my educational career, someone was taking a vacation. Okay, we'll see you when you get back. We'll figure it out when you get back. That's not the expectation anymore. A week or 2 of lost learning is a lot of lost learning. So our educators are stepping up. Grades 5 through 12, we're providing live teaching whenever we can, during prep, on lunches. One of my teachers last week gave up every single lunch to do live learning. I've had Helen Rabel stepped up at least a dozen times now where we have pushed classes together, and she's taught math lessons to multiple classes. I haven't asked her to do it. She's just done it because that's what it takes. Sorry, I get emotional, but it's emotional. I want to look back now to our academic model. Again, something that our PLC leaders have been doing for the last 4 years, because to me, this really isn't a COVID issue. This is a what academic model and what school and district do we want to become? Our PLC leaders, along with all of our teaching staff, have been able to weigh in on this and help us define what does School D look like, sound like, and feel like, both for our students and for our staff. And as you can see, I'm not going to read through all of them, but we did a word cloud, and what words come out more, are bigger or bolded. But we're looking at a learner-centered experience where productive struggle is a good thing because you're going to learn your way through something. Students having collaborative discussion. They feel empowered by what they are learning and the ability to apply it to scenarios and situations that they don't have. And we've started to make those moves. Mathematics is probably the biggest one that has moved, as we've moved from the procedural way of teaching mathematics, 312, to the conceptual way. And I know some of you on the board, as parents, that's been a very big, difficult change for you as a parent. but our students are in a better place because of it. As you can see for our staff, again, they're the facilitator of learning. They're not the provider of that information. And again, they're working interdependently. So again, this hasn't been something that was put together. This is something that's been, over the last 2 weeks. This is something that we have been working on as a district over the last 4 years. But it's coming to a point now where when we go out to our buildings and we talk to all our PLC leadership teams, and they're asking for us to get to School D, we need more time. We need to change the way that we do education in order to get there. So, what are the benefits of this 2-hour early release? And then we'll talk about some of the, some of the questions that got brought up earlier as well. But again, the ability to collaborate for a student's academic, but then also their social and their emotional needs. Again, kids can't learn if they don't feel safe at school, if they don't feel supported at school, if they don't believe that they have a strong relationship with that teacher and that teacher believes that they can do it. Increases our ability to, again, Dr. Spicuzza brought a motto to our district: we'll be the best at getting better. Right? Continuous improvement throughout. Not extra days in the summer one time, but throughout the school year. How are we learning from each other? We talk about recruiting and maintaining a high quality staff. That's one of the, on the board agenda, that's one of your agenda items that you guys have put out, is that we want to be able to recruit and retain staff. And this is one of the things that staff are saying that they need. And again, giving that time to provide that feedback to students and make them part of that learning process. So again, all very important. Again, the big thing is, why do we need it? Because collaboration is a premium in this model. If we're going to become School D, we have to be able to work interdependently. And again, that's the way that we have to do it. Again, the teaching and learning experience has changed. And it's changed greatly in the last 7-8 years. Again, we have standards aligned with the focus on real priority standards. We're not just trying to cover all the standards. We're highlighting certain standards and certain grade levels as these are a priority, and we're going to do whatever it takes to guarantee that that's a viable curriculum we are delivering, that all students can be successful. Again, we're moving towards multiple opportunities to demonstrate proficiency. Secondary level, retakes and redos. That's a different model than the model when we went to school. You failed the test, we move on. If we focus on learning, the calendar does not dictate when the learning must be done. Again, that timely intervention, meeting the needs of our students, because again, we know some students are strong in some areas and weak in others, and that changes based on the content, based on the unit, and based on what they're bringing with them to school. And again, shifting that teacher-led direct instruction to that student-led exploration. Right? It's very important in this model if we really believe it. Again, another slide is how will it be used. I know that's always a big question. Obviously, special education needs, a lot of times we struggle to have IEP meetings. So a lot of times they're after school, early mornings. Last year when we did have that 2-hour early out at the intermediate and elementary, we were able to do a lot of them during that time, which was very convenient for families as well, because we had provided them with an avenue to have their students still on site. So parents were, didn't have to worry about a babysitter or things like that. But we know things shift from week to week. Josh talked about how many students he's had out. From any given week, you could have a low number of students out, or you can have a high number of students out. And again, we got to be able to respond to that. So it's very important that for what we're asking. Just want to remind some of the responses that we had last year from the intermediate families. Again, their support for us, even the last one. It's not ideal for our family, but we all have to be willing to do our part to support our amazing teachers, which then keep our students learning, right? So early release doesn't just support our teachers. It actually does support our families. It does support our students as well. At the intermediate, we had a number of students and families that would opt to stay at those 2-hour early outs and work with our educational aides to get that needed homework support that couldn't be provided at home, because we have more and more families working multiple jobs. As our curriculum shifts, the experiences we had as in school as adults, we cannot necessarily help our students through some of these shifts, because again, it's a new way of thinking, a new way of learning. So this really provides us, again, with another opportunity to meet the needs of our students. And Mr. Anyway is going to join me up here, but again, some of the anticipated questions that we had and some that we had last year put up here, and I want to go through each one. It's a little more in depth than what's on the one-line answer, but transportation, that's always a big one. How are we going to get kids to those partner centers? And if this were to be approved, again, our end of the day busing at 2 hours early would be the same. We had opportunities last year at our sites for students to stay late if they did not have the means to go home. We had some families take advantage of that. And then we had students that would stay also for that additional help and supervision to the end of the day. So we do provide for families that have that need.
Can I ask a really quick question, because it's on that question?
Yep.
Have our daycare centers, have they had any responses? Are they able to have staff there? Because this would adjust their staffing model too, I would assume.
Last year, one of the daycare centers was able to accept students right at the 2-hour early out. One was not.
Okay.
But either way, if they're able to accept them or not, we're able to keep all of our students that need to stay. Last year at the intermediate, our high day was 23. We averaged 12 that needed to stay.
And was that through the YMCA program? Or
Nope,
was that through
that was
own?
provided by our aides. So our aides would work with our students and provide that. And again, we had academic time. We also had some outdoor additional gym time, or out on the playground and things like that. So it was a structured 2 hours
Sure.
as well. It wasn't just throw the kids in a holding tank and we just wait till the time runs out. Parents then can opt after that. So at the 3 o'clock time, which was the normal end of the school day, we would have busing again provided to go to the daycare sites, to go over to the for the students who do participate in the Y Care afterwards. But there was no change to the Y Care programming for this.
And then I would assume, so we're paying our aides, which would mean that we're not adjusting their hours since they're hourly rate. They're not looking at a pay decrease of what they're expecting, because we're going to still contract with them for the same hours to provide this care and stuff, right?
Correct. And what Sarah and I found out is that the aides actually, between themselves, sort of worked out a rotation. All aides were welcome to stay that normally would be there to the end of the day on Mondays. But the aides actually took advantage of this time as well.
Great. Thank you.
To have more family time or to run some errands and things like that. So it actually was a benefit to our aides as well, but no one was denied if they wanted to stay through their normal contract time.
Great, thanks.
So again, we talked about the improved instruction and programming. Again, all means all. So we're trying to meet the needs of all of our students. Not just the ones on the 4-year track or the 2-year track, all of our students. I'll skip over, Mr. Anyway, you can talk about the special ed in a minute here. I know another big one is instructional minutes, right? We are losing learning time. But we're gaining so many other things. It's quality over quantity. And again, we've shown that this works. So how much time are we, or where is our time if this were to be approved? Is at the K-5 level, we'd be 42 hours over the state requirement of minutes. And at the secondary level, we'd be 14 hours over the state requirement of minutes. So we're still well over what the state deems is appropriate, even with this time adjustment. Mr. Anyway?
As far as special education goes, I did want to just kind of talk a little bit about that as far as, ending a couple hours early on a Monday. What we have typically done, and what we did last year when I worked with Ms. Dusick and Mr. Kosmowski especially, was look at kind of the overall K-5 elementary schedule and really do some little adjustments to make sure that some of those minutes were not necessarily coming out of those high intervention times. We wanted to prioritize some of those things. So we did do some adjustments to just generalize schedules to make sure that we were meeting our required minutes. It's a little trickier at the secondary level where we kind of go by class periods, but in those places, there are still some places that you can pull kids. We have still like kind of a cardinal time at homeroom. Some additional times we could maybe grab kids for some extra intervention. And if there was any marked difference in kind of instructional minutes, we would have conversations with parents about that and hold the new IEP meetings. So again, we really don't feel like this is going to impact instructional minutes as far as special education. We would do some reorganization of existing schedules to make sure that those were being done. Obviously, we're not just chopping off the end of the day and saying, well, if you had speech here, you're out of luck. We're rescheduling those things so that they still occur as per the IEP.
And again, just one other question I know that I've received is, why an early out versus late start, right? If you think about, especially at the elementary level, if there's a student that needs to be unsupervised, which we know that does happen in some families, that they wouldn't be able to supervise, are we more confident that the student can be successful in waking up, getting dressed, brushing teeth, eating breakfast, getting on the bus, versus are we more comfortable with the student gets home mid-afternoon, they've already had lunch, they've got some learning work to do, they need to get into the house and maybe find a snack. So where can kids be more successful? And that's why the 2-hour early out versus the 2-hour late start. So just in summation, specifically what we're asking the board to consider and take action on next month is a 2-hour early out every Monday for the rest of the school year. That's 17 Mondays over the course of the year.
Thanks, Michael. Board, I know this is an information discussion, but it might, if you have questions now, let's try to get at least them in the court here in case they need to go back and get some answers for us. So Tanya, do you have questions that you want to kick off here?
Well, I don't have as many questions. I think I actually sent questions off and ahead of this, and you guys have done a good job answering those questions for me. I had a lot of questions around special education, right, busing, all that kind of good stuff. So I just want to really commend all of your hard work on this and the recognition of the need for this. Obviously, I work in schools too. I think many of us on the board are aligned with schools in some way or another. And you're absolutely right. This is not an isolated struggle here in Prescott, Wisconsin. I'm also subbing every day. And what happens is teachers, we talked a lot about absences and subbing, and the reason why that was discussed is because how that impacts not just a teacher's day, but everybody within the system's day. So if I am a teacher and I have a 45-minute to prep for my whole entire day and give feedback and grade papers and do all the meetings and collaborate, right? And now I'm having to take on 2 classes, or I'm covering this class for an hour, I now effectively have no time in the day to do that kind of stuff. Teachers at the beginning of the day, like you said, not just teachers, again, all educators, but at the beginning of the day and the end of the day, it is maybe once or twice a week that I don't have some sort of meeting. And that's true across the board for staff members. So that's not a time that teachers actually get to use for good planning and collaboration. It's just not there. So I really think you guys are doing a really nice job recognizing the need. One of our priorities is maintaining staff. I know that that's an area that we're going to continue to talk about throughout this board meeting and as we go, because that is an area that we're working on growing in. But right now, I think there is a survey by a nonprofit called RAND that came out just a couple weeks ago, and right now teachers are saying nationally 1 in 4 teachers are saying they're likely to leave education after this year or sometime during this year. I know I've had that experience in my department. I've lost probably 3 or 4 teachers alone in special education in my building already this year. and we still aren't covering. I have 5 teachers doing an overload because of that. This is a consistent problem. We took a class at the U of M last year on how to address this problem specifically in schools. And one of the things that was recognized was that we are constantly putting more on teachers' plates. The pandemic has put more on teachers' plates. It is unrealistic to think teachers come in and just do the curriculum. They do way more than that. From social, emotional, from trauma, from ALICE training that you guys just did that, 20 years ago wouldn't have been part of what a teacher does. Constantly, all day long, more than just curriculum. We're putting more and more on them, and without time that we're purposely giving educators, they are not able to meet those expectations. And in the end, our kids just aren't learning to the capacity that they could, or when really good instruction is provided. So I absolutely have no questions on this. I think that things like this is a must right now in our day and age, and how to meet the needs of our staff as well as continuing to educate our kids. I think there is no doubt that education is in a crisis period right now, and as schools we have to adjust and we have to meet the needs of our staff in order to meet the needs of our kids. So I really don't have any other questions. I commend your work. I look forward to hearing more about it next month. I hope that these conversations are continuing to be had in the buildings, so teachers are really purposeful and planned in what this day will look like and what this time means. And our community right now is hearing that this is a conversation and can start making some plans in case it does pass.
All right, thanks, Tanya. Pat?
Yeah, I just got a couple random questions, and I do want to start off by saying I hope that any of the teacher, staff, or administration don't take any of these as being non-supportive. I think in respect to the parents that are going to have some challenges with this, some of the educational minute things that have already been brought up, I feel obligated to talk about it. I do think maybe this is a really good spot, though, real quick, Mike and Dr. Spikuza, to make sure that we get that workshop to understand the report card on the agenda so that we can fully understand how we're doing and the gaps that we have. I think that plays in really tightly to some of this. I want to start by saying, and one of my questions was, what are the issues, what are being accomplished by this? I think you guys did a very thorough job in laying that out. I think an obvious concern that I would have is that there's no way that 2 hours a week is going to solve any of that. We might be able to chip away. I'm not qualified, I think, to make that statement. You guys are, but it feels like more of an educational model needs to be flipped on its head, and a lot more work needs to be done in that regard. I do hope, with that being said, in trying to get to the school D scenario, I like that approach. I personally feel that would be the right model to go with as well. I hope we're not adding more to everybody's day. Now that we gain 2 hours, I hope that we're not adding additional tasks and additional to-dos. I feel like of all the issues that I've heard, this time needs to be spent. You guys said collaboration, you said prep, we said a million different things. I hope we're not adding any to-dos to anybody or anything. I think that would be a massive mistake. And again, I'm not qualified to make that statement, but from the cheap seats here, that's what it appears to me. Michael, you talked about, I appreciate the early out versus the late start. I think one thing, and I'm not asking for a response right now, is take like a freshman, for example, right, who then needs to get back to, they can't drive, their parents aren't home from work, they need to get back to school for basketball practice, whatever. You guys have probably thought about it. I'm sure there's something in place. It's just something that I had written down as a concern. Man, I don't know that I have a whole lot else right now, Mike, so thank you for the
I know you said
notes.
you didn't want an answer right now, but in my understanding, it is correct that kids are able to stay after school, you were saying. So they would be able to stay up here, supervised probably by our teacher aides.
Yeah, and just to remind the board, the elementary did it since October last year, and the secondary did it at the end of the year. So we did have those student athletes that would stay afterwards, work in collaboration areas, in the commons, in the library, some extra prep work, maybe Shay can weigh in on that.
Just gonna add to that if I can. also, I know like I was in the musical last year, but I also had sports after school, so we ended up pushing our musical practice up so that I could do both in the same day, which was really beneficial. I know some of my friends did peer tutoring during that time so that some kids could get some extra help. And then I also know that like in sports, a lot of times like upperclassmen are very good about giving rides for underclassmen, so I would say that honestly, the 2-hour release sounds pretty good from my perspective. Obviously, high schoolers always like having a little extra time not in school. But I know like when we did have the 45-minute early release like 2 years ago, we would always stay after and work on homework. I would help my teammates out before our practices and stuff. So I think it's a pretty good collaborative time even for students.
One more thing, Shay reminded me of this. I think that's great. I'm happy to hear if there's student peer kind of tutor or aid for those at-risk students. I think that would be a fantastic thing to do with these 2 extra hours of the day. So,
Steve, any questions, comments?
Well, I mean, I wanted to address Joe Roll's comment at the beginning of the meeting just to say that I understand his point, and in a lot of regards I agree with it. We also have a population of our constituents who in this regard are aligned with the board, sounds like, to say that our staff needs some additional support, and that this is one thing that we can do to make things better in our buildings. So I think that's important to understand as well. In working with Mr. Inoue and Mr. Kosmalski, Mr. Figge over the last several years, from a professionalism standpoint, I don't think you're going to find a higher quality of people. And so as a board member who does not work in education directly, I really take a lot of stock in what they tell us the staff needs, and they're having that communication from the staff. So that's just a huge amount of weight for a decision like this in my regards. Certainly understanding concerns with parents, and the district administration can do as much as they can to help mitigate that. But I think we're really talking about our staff, and to me, it sounds like it's a dire need. So that's all the comment I have right now. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Vicki.
Yeah, there were a couple questions that I had, and they were answered, the late start versus the early out. I think what Shay had to say was great. The fact that, yeah, if upperclassmen could give underclassmen a ride, they did that. They were helping tutor. They were participating, and we got collaboration then on the student level, which is great. And listening to what especially Mr. Figge had to say, when you have a student recognizing that their teacher is stressed, I think that's pretty concerning. We want more teachers down the road. We need to give the teachers that we have the opportunity to be supportive of one another and enjoy their jobs. And if they enjoy their job, their students see that they're enjoying their job. And hopefully that would inspire more kids to go into teaching. So yeah, if our administrators are hearing from their teachers that they need the time, they need the support from one another and the collaboration time, I think we need to do that. I have zero background in education aside from being a student at one time. So yeah, and to hear that there's, it worked well last year. Parents that needed it used it. It sounds like it's just, kind of a continuation of what we saw worked last year, doing it this year. And you had said that the high school was already practicing this early out before COVID, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, that is correct. It was a late start back in like 2008, and then it switched to an early out on Wednesdays, pre-COVID.
And it was working really well for the high school?
Yeah, it definitely gave some of that collaborative time during the contracted day to our staff, yes.
And you said this was something that you've been working on, the model has been changing, and you've been working on it for 4 years. Was it something that if COVID hadn't hit, was it something that you were really leaning towards asking for before COVID?
Great question. It was. In the spring of 2020 was when the PLC team had finally finalized the word clouds that you saw there. And our entire staff was given an opportunity to weigh in on how to improve or questions that they might have. And we were ready to come to the school board, and then COVID happened. So yes, this is something that, and again, I want to kind of separate COVID from it. The one thing I will say, the one benefit of COVID was last year is it forced us to maybe move a little bit faster, especially in the realm of technology and being able to provide that learning to the students who are not at school. And we are still able to do that and continue that this year, which I think would have been a much longer learning process. But again, baptism by fire. So it actually is a blessing in disguise in that regard, and only in that regard.
And Vicki, to your point, Michael, I think you and Sarah kind of brought it up at the admin meeting. The number of instructional minutes or hours that our teachers in the United States are asked to deliver instruction compared to some other countries, what's that kind of disproportionate?
So whenever you look at some of the big testing and reporting out on state education, right? United States continues to drop, and Japan and Norway and some of these countries continue to grow. The Japanese model is they prepare and collaborate equal amount of time to what they teach. So typically 4 hours a day of preparation and collaboration, 4 hours a day of direct instruction. In the United States, that's not our model. We are on and live 6.5 hours a day. You get your 30-minute duty-free lunch, maybe. And then typically you get a prep. And as Mr. Figge shared, is a lot of those preps then are filling in another classroom.
All right, thank you. Answered my questions.
I'm not going to regurgitate any of this. This is all great conversation. The only question I had is there any differences from last year? Does this look almost identical to what we did last year?
It would look identical from a parent perspective and a student perspective. It may shift slightly different the way that we respond at school. And the response, again, I'm with Pat. We don't want to have any additional ads, no more rocks in the backpack here, but just to structure it a little bit more where now that we have additional interventionists at the elementary level, our special education, and more of a schedule of when we're going to collaborate. Like it might be the first Monday of the month it's the PLC team with the special education teachers, and that's their collaboration time. And maybe the second or third one would be scheduled. That would then be sort of our SST, which is our student services, along with our PLC leaders. So just a little more structure that way to make sure that we are utilizing that time to be interdependently working and collaborating together.
All right, thanks, Michael. And I'm just going to kind of lay this out. So this was information discussion. It was a very great presentation. Man, I would encourage anybody that really is interested in knowing more about this, if there's concerns from parents, to view the live stream here when it's sent up for the recording, because there's a lot of great information.
And
So
for
I
those
hope
of you that can't see, Michael's making the call sign, so it sounds like call, let
Call
people
any
know.
administrator,
Yeah.
talk to a teacher, seesaw message, Google Meet.
Yep. So we have 4 weeks basically to our next board meeting where this will be an agenda item to vote on. I assume that agenda item. We've already gone through this lengthy presentation, a lot of information. We'll come back and we'll have feedback, I'm sure, and we'll be able to make a decision at that point. I urge anybody in the community that is interested in this to dial up the video and watch this part, and then ask questions to their administrators if they have them, and to us as well.
Yeah, and one thing I know, as an administrative team, we will communicate this out to our families. So that way they know that this is a business item
Yep.
on the next school board meeting, along with answering some of those Q&As and things that we learned from last year from this.
And then it could potentially happen with, so that they're not only getting 1 week notice. to
Correct.
make- Okay.
Yep. So we'll probably hold off until after, maybe that first week after the holidays, and communicate that out so our families have a few
Right.
weeks to provide feedback and to make some thoughts and pre-planning if it
Yep.
were to pass.
We meet Wednesday the 12th. We finish out that week, and then another week, and then the following Monday is when it would go in.
And Michael, I think this would be really great conversation to continue at our work session when we talk about report cards. I'd be really interested in knowing how this kind of model will support the learning of especially our students that didn't meet the mark last year because of, for whatever reason, and how we're trying to bring them back up, and how this somewhat intervention and time for staff to collaborate might help with that.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Let's move on to item B, the calendar for next year.
Michael changes hats and comes right back. Thank you to the administrative team.
All right, academic calendar process. So as we just got done speaking for a lengthy time, and I think, Pat, you said it right, is, if we're going to school D, and that's the model that we feel like we want our children at, is there are some things in education we have to flip over, right? And one of the things that we control the most over is our academic calendar. So as we make those shifts to that learner-centered organization, again, where all students are empowered to succeed, we're going to have to plan that into our calendar. So just a couple things on the calendar build process. If you remember, I think it was 5 years ago, we had a committee across the district come together. Again, after Act 10 went through, this is not a negotiable bargaining item. Teachers can work in an advisory capacity to the board, but there is no bargaining that happens. Since it had been 5 years, we did do another input survey to our staff. Again, our staff has changed over like any organization in the last 5 years. We had 127 responses to that input survey. And then next month, we'll come back with some draft calendars for you to look at. Again, meeting DPI minute requirements, again, supporting that program, moving us towards that vision of School D in our academic model. And then some of those priorities of our employees, but then also partnering with St. Joseph's Parish School as well. And again, once we have some drafts made that accomplish those are reviewed by our district PLC leadership team, and then they'll come back to the board for consideration. The input survey, again, we had 127 staff respond to this. Thanksgiving week, Wednesday, remains a top priority for all of our staff. Some other things, parent-teacher conference that Friday afterwards, when we asked just the teaching staff who worked the additional hours 2 nights of that week and put in an extra full day, 98% of the staff said they preferred having that Friday off. Typically, we take that and we align it to MEA week in Minnesota as well. Week-long spring break, all staff, 79% of staff reported that that's a priority for them. Evenly distributed professional development days versus front-loading or end-loading. Again, that model of continuous improvement throughout the year, continually being the best to get better. Observance of January 2nd. Next year, the calendar, January 1st is on a Sunday. So 82% of the staff preferred that as being observed. But they also, we also had them priority rank these different ones, and it actually ranked lower than ending the school year earlier. So if it means I need to extend my school year, I'd rather work the second, but if it doesn't really make a difference, we'd like to have the second off. The other one that was a little bit different, MLK Junior Day. Some of our staff have language in their contract that MLK Junior Day is a day of off and of paid. As you know, right now, we do have professional development on MLK Junior Day for the last several years. That turns into a floating holiday for those staff. But of the staff that do have that language in their contract alone, only 20% said it was a priority for them. And again, they could potentially take that day as their day as well. And then teaching staff were split on, should it be a no school day or should it be a professional development day? Again, when we go to the ranking, they ranked ending the school year a higher priority. MLK Junior Day was the lowest priority on the ranking list. Just some unique things to the 22-23 calendar. September 1st, which is the earliest date we can start unless we get a waiver from the state, is a Thursday. That'll allow for the 2 days of ramp up to learning for that Tuesday and Wednesday before. So we'll have a long weekend before and then a long weekend as we start the school year as well. Christmas Day and New Year's consequently are on Sundays. So the question will be, and I've seen some calendars already from other neighboring districts where people are working December 23rd. They're working that Friday, and I've seen some where that Friday is off, allowing people to have that travel day before Christmas Eve. So that'll be something that we'll have to put into the different options that we bring forward. Again, that federal holiday is January 2nd, that Monday. Easter Sunday is a little bit earlier in April, it's the 9th. And then Memorial towards the end of May there on the 29th. So that's just a blank calendar sitting up there right now and just kind of where it lays. And anyone who's been on a calendar committee knows is you have X number of days, you can shuffle the deck, but in the end you can pick one up and move it and that just slides everything one day longer. So we'll come up with some different options. But one of the things is, as we just talked about with our academic model, is that some of the calendar options will look a little bit different than the standard calendar. You know, could that be, is a 2-hour early release the model that we want to go with, and that gets built into our calendar? You know, some schools, like my wife works in Lakeville School District, they have a professional development day every single month, and then on top of that they have 5 or teacher collaboration days, and then 2 half days that are student assessment days. So that's their strategy for, again, metering out and filling the needs of that collaboration that's needed throughout the school year. So I'm going to bring you with a couple different options and ways to weigh that out. So is there any direction or priorities of the board that you would like considered? So that way when I bring these models here, you just don't, oh, this one doesn't fit this and this one doesn't fit that.
Yeah, let's start with Steve. Do you have any comments on this at this point?
I don't. I mean, not being able to see the PD days in here yet and that sort of thing, that kind of helps me visually align it anyway. But it sounds like you guys are engaged with the correct people. You know, I think some parent input will be interesting over the next 4 weeks as well. But, you know, I know for the community, parents, families, spring break's always kind of a nice adder that people seem to really like to kind of give that break in the spring. So I don't have any specific comments otherwise, though.
All right, Vicki?
No, I don't have any specific questions.
Pat?
No, I guess piggybacking on the spring break, I think I've said this before. It's too bad that it's always so late in March. I think that has to do with some testing.
ACT testing?
Yep, so I understand, but it's a comment I hear a lot from people.
Okay.
And then I would echo too, the earlier you can get out, the better. So I don't know if what this purple box shows as the draft potential finish date, you know, whatever. So that's
one thing I can share is it seems highly improbable that students will be getting done before Memorial Day like they were able to in this year's calendar.
Yeah.
Tanya?
No questions. I'm happy that you redid that survey with staff with preferences. I'm sure we have a lot of new staff at that point, and I think it's really interesting. That's kind of how we began having a consistent spring break, for example, or week-long, I should say, spring break. So I think that's great, getting that feedback. I really have no questions at this point because it looks really at kind of the infancy stages of building the calendar.
Shay, do you care about next year's calendar?
I mean, it doesn't really affect me, but I guess I'm kind of curious if, like, students would be going past Memorial Day weekend, would you still have graduation for seniors on that weekend? Or is that?
Mr. Figge is tentatively shaking his head yes.
Okay. I was just
And I think that's kind of a tradition, is that Friday now before Memorial is typically graduation ceremony. Yep.
All right, thanks, Michael.
Yep.
Just so we can recap that information discussion now, is this going to be a business item next month? Or are we just going to get some proposals that we'll then consider for February? Is that kind of how we're laying it out?
No,
Or
it'll
is this
be
gonna
your
be a business
discretion.
item?
Typically, we've tried mainly to try to get it done and approved in January.
Okay.
just because of people's schedules and partnering with both 4K centers and also St. Joe's.
Anybody have any concerns with that approach?
Well, normally we see kind of the laid out days, we kind of give feedback, but I'm comfortable saying, let's hope for January. If we have big questions, we can always decide not to vote on it that night too.
As long as you guys can go through the process you need to go through, I don't know that it doesn't matter to me.
All right, thank you. We'll move on to item C, School Board Community Engagement Roadmap.
Well, earlier this evening, you formalized the resolution both to go forward to the electorate on April 5th, 2022. There is on the screen kind of a referendum FAQs. This is in draft form. If you kind of think of how the different months will lay out, we'll start to make sure that we have documents that are fair and informative and educational to make sure that, remember, we started this process in 2019, and so there's 3 years of information that's gone before, many different stakeholders that have been in place, and trying to understand how educational funding works, going back to the annual meeting, our current audit, and understanding how the funding system works, is that operational funding happens to the state, not capital funding. And so capital funding for things like 15 million is not practical, nor is it pragmatic, and it does not happen anywhere in the state of Wisconsin with regards to saving something like 15 million. That means that you go to referendum to invest in community buildings. These are facilities that are already invested and created and gifted to the district for its students and for staff to demonstrate learning. We'll have these FAQs. Many of this information are things that you've already seen. We have kind of what is covered in the plan, and it goes by the different schools. Obviously, it's a draft, so we'll be kind of taking some of the acronyms and making sure that it's Malone Elementary, the intermediate, and middle school, and you can kind of see the different things about whether or not it's a roof. Again, generational costs, the HVAC system, electrical, plumbing, that'll be available. What we are looking for is just understanding how taxpayers will be impacted and understanding that. We look at this to be kind of a time when most of our families are focused on the holiday season, meeting with friends and family. And so within the month of January, we'll be building up kind of the different information and, if you will, engagement opportunities for the board. The month of February, we'll start to communicate out to our community, both through our staff first, then to our families, and then to the broader community. In March, we will have site visits. So we'll have open houses at all 3 of the buildings in a very similar way that our Facility Advisory Committee, when they conducted the meetings, we made sure that they were in the buildings that we were talking about, so they understood when we talk about, kind of unit ventilators. What is a unit ventilator? Where does it look? Why is it noisy? How old is it? And you can see the ceiling tiles that are leaking or the drips. If it was raining tonight and we were in a different building, you'd be seeing water coming in. So those are things that we would happen, making sure that the site visits and open houses are available. And then obviously April 5th is going to be soon. Understand that our last, going back to the calendar, the last 3rd week of March is our spring break. So there's a break in kind of momentum of being able to kind of educate the community. But that kind of is how it's laying out, is that we would start to engage in a more informative way and targeted way in February and kind of build up towards April
5th. Pat, do you have any questions or comments on this point?
No, I mean, in review, my only comment would be, this looks like a great start. I want to push the heck out of social media. I'm happy to see that there's right now there's planned at least 1 post a week. I think unfortunately a lot of information, both factual and unfactual information, is shared on social media, and we need a way to combat, not to necessarily advocate for a yes vote, but so that the real facts are out there and people can make a decision based on those facts. So I think social media is really important to push.
Tanya?
Yes, during our work session, we really asked, and I can't remember, Pat, I think you brought it up, but just kind of that communication plan and making sure that we had a good one. I feel really a lot more comfortable looking at kind of I would say, the skeleton outline of what that all looks like and how that works. I'm hoping, and I believe this is already occurring, but people are kind of getting like in place of what their responsibilities are, pulling committees together, community members together, all that kind of stuff that we need, and figuring out how this actually pans out. I do agree with Pat. There is a lot of misinformation that is out there in many different venues, and so I think just making sure that people have access to factual information that is easy to understand is really important to me. So, and multiple different venues.
Mike, I'm sorry, I forgot one thing. I know that the Facility Advisory Committee, many members raised their hand. They want to be a part of the communication, whatever that looks like. So I don't want to forget their involvement in that. So.
Yep. All right, Steve, any questions or comments on this?
Nothing right now, Mike, thanks.
Yeah, Vicki.
No, I think Tanya pointed it out, and so did Pat, about the social media and just making sure that we have the correct information out there for everybody.
All right, Shay, any comments on this one?
No.
All right, I think this looks good, Rick, thank you. We'll move on to item D, COVID mitigation and protocols currently in place.
You wish we wouldn't have to talk about all this all the time, but it's not done with us. But I did want to make sure that everybody understands that we are still doing what we can to mitigate. I think the main thing is that we have continue to communicate out to families anytime there are cases. We do also have a testing center, and we've put up the times and dates. We just went to a 5-day-a-week option, and initially we did not believe we would be able to do the holiday schedule. We just confirmed with the state vendor that they will be able to still be on site next week, the 20th through the 23rd, through the 23rd, and then the week of the 27th, they'll be on site on the 28th and 29th. We are looking at whether or not they could be there on Friday as well. Remember that they are the 30th is good. Okay, so Mandy, I know you're listening, and so I'm sure if you were really quick, you could probably edit the website as it's being displayed. Be the magic behind the website. But the good news is that we have many coming out of Thanksgiving, going into winter break. We have many of our staff members are testing. Again, it's at no cost. They get the rapid test, but then also the PCR test that comes in. Obviously, it depends on volume, but typically the results are coming back within 72 hours. This has helped staff that are working with elderly parents being able to be a little bit more comfortable as they're going home, or making sure that as their kids are showing symptoms, being able to have that quickly ascertain whether or not it's positive or negative. We continue to report out our COVID numbers on a weekly basis and the number of vaccines both within the community and within the district. We will be getting, the Department of Health and Services has started to report out the number of vaccines for students ages 5 through 11, and that is just right now, individual students are up to 1 dose. And so that information will be added to our website as well. Again, all the information, the Nurses Corner vaccination information, and the links to the CDC and Department of Health is available for people to stay educated on it.
Anybody have any questions on this one? All right, let's move on. Item E, board policy discussion on engagement and staff communication. So, do you want to tee this up, Rick, or do you want me to?
Yep, I think these are, I'll mention one thing, is that there was a session currently run by WASD. It was recorded, and what was interesting about it, I know Mike had a conflict, it's in the middle of the day, I think he has a day job, he told me, and he was unable to be on that call with me. However, It is recorded, and it was specifically about the balance of boards as you work as a body of the whole, and that your board policies are the law, the local law. And so you have 2 policies that you wanted to review, and I think anytime you have policies, as you kind of grow into them, we switched to Neola, is you want to make sure that you're getting feedback and refining it to make sure that it meets the needs of the board and our stakeholders. My job is to implement the policies that you have in place, and so I think there are 2 that you wanted to talk about. Obviously, one, Joe, you had mentioned earlier, and so that's the second one, is just on the public comment. Many districts around you and within the country are looking at it. I know that your goal has been to continue to have public comment. It's just how it works and whether or not you have it twice within a meeting. And then with regards to discussion and engagement of the board is how do you want information to come to you through reports, or how do you gather information or direct me to gather information for you? So those are the policies that you wanted to have a further discussion, and I'll take notes with Katie and monitor what you would like to come back on January 12th, or processes that you put in place.
Yeah, and maybe I can kind of just do the best I can to, I guess, lay it out there for the rest of the board, and you guys just jump in here if you want. The reason why we're talking about this first one here, around board staff communications, I know there's 3 policies here. One is about the authority of the individual board members. I don't think anybody's looking at changing that. We all understand our role as board members, individual board members, is we don't have any authority as board members. That's not what we're talking about here. We're specifically looking at the other 2 policies around the staff, and just the ability for staff to have a more of an opportunity to reach out to a board member if they feel the need to, for whatever reason. We've heard through the community, and everybody has their own instances of this, that sometimes it feels like the board is untouchable. It's hard to get a hold of a board member to maybe express any concerns at all, for fear of maybe possible retribution. In fact, it's because the way our policies are laid out, and it's clear in our policies, the ones that we voted on. This is what our policies state. So it's very, very clear that on how these are laid out. So I wanted to bring this to the board to see thoughts on it as it is today, and if there's anything that we want to change and how we would go about making that change, the process that we would need to start to do that. And I'm going to stop there. I'm just going to call on my board members here. So Pat, maybe I'll just lean over here to you first and get your feedback on this one as well.
Okay.
If you want me to start with somebody else,
Yeah,
I'm
why don't
more
we?
than happy to.
Yeah,
Tanya, do you
skip
have?
around.
You want to?
Oh, me, yeah.
Yeah. You guys.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just begin with some questions, I think. So, Mike, thank you for kind of teeing this up and having that initial conversation. I can say for myself as a board member, I've heard that same statement many times, that staff can't talk to a board member and in fear of I don't even know what exactly, but of some kind of disciplinary action, let's say. And so we as a board anyways, or myself, wanted to really kind of look into what these policies are. So we asked Katie to kind of dive in and let us know what policies are out there that pertains to communication with staff, so they're all kind of in one place. And we could do some homework on understanding what it is that we have in policy and what, if anything, needs to change, or what do we need to have conversation with. So that's where we're at, or that's where I'm at anyways as a board member. I had some questions just on the policies, and this is information and discussion right now. We're not making decisions right now, so this is stuff that we can come back to us at the next board meeting. I think we'll probably see these back at an agenda item next month as well. But one of the things in policy 3112, which is board staff communications, if anybody's following at home, there are Neola policies, they're found on our website. It says the basic lines of communication in the chain of command are shown in policy, and I didn't see that chain of command policy here. And so that was one of the things I was looking for, and I'm sure it's embedded within there, but that would be great, Katie, if you could let us know, or somebody, a little bit more. I don't know, Pat, if you found that policy, the chain of command. So I'd be interested in that because it references that prior to anything else, really. There's another mention in a second one of these policies that pertain to staff communication, which is the professional staff and support staff one. It's policy 31124122. And in it, they refer to a policy, it's pulling up right now, I wrote it down, but it mentions a policy, I'm just gonna look it up exactly here. It says consistent with the expectations of board bylaw 044.5. I don't see that we have that policy when I looked it up in the bylaw section. And so that's something that I would be interested in knowing what that is, where it is, why we don't see it, and it's hard for me to determine whether or not I can talk to staff or staff can talk to me when I can't reference back to the policy that's supposed to kind of outline some of that. So I'd like to see more information on that at our next meeting as well. I would say with kind of some missing information and pieces there, and part of this is because a couple years ago we overhauled all of our policies because some of them were like, I can't remember how old, 30, 40, I mean, really old policies. But I think some of these things we need to come back to and look at and get a little bit more clarity on them now that we're living and breathing and the community's feeling them and giving us some feedback. So I'd like to know more about those two kind of things. I actually didn't think it was super clear to me where my role is when it comes to communicating with staff because of, I think, some of that missing stuff. So yeah, I guess I'll stop there for now and maybe ask more questions as I come.
Yeah, and I don't think we're going to solve any of these problems tonight. I want to make that clear. We're not here to debate this for an hour. I wanted to just get it out there so people can know that it's something that the board is looking at. I'm going to let others jump in here, but where I see this kind of going is I think we're going to need some type of I hate to use the word, but a committee or at least a couple of board members and maybe some staff mixed into there to try to come back with some direction from the board on what changes we would like to see, and then figure out how to make that into policy. Pat, I'm gonna stop there now and let you jump in here.
Yeah, I think in the spirit of why we're talking about this, I think that's fair. And I just got done saying let's not add anything more, to their plates. But knowing that this is a potential concern, I think that's only fair to get a committee made up of staff and administration alike to come forth with a couple of recommendations. I don't see any, when I look at this policy, I can look at it a couple of different ways. I don't see anything in here that precludes, myself talking to any staff, and I don't see anything that precludes any staff talking to me. I think we use words like official and what does that mean, and then bylaws and some of the other the board policy that you brought up that we don't see. And I think if we clean up some of that and get some recommendations, I think that'd be a great starting point.
A lot of one thing, and I know we've got two people online that we'll go to, one thing that I noticed kind of throughout these is that it talks about, and I can't remember exactly the terminology, but that boards as an individual aren't considered a board, right? They lack the authority of being in a board. But it's when we're in a majority. And so I would like to see some cleanup. I mean, I think that's different than, right? Talking one-on-one with somebody versus, going to a group of people or something like that. So I'd like some clarity there as well.
Steve, do you have anything to add here?
Sure I do. And I think it's important to clarify, Mike, that it wasn't just you who wanted this on the agenda. So I've also driven towards getting this on the agenda and discussion, as well as some other board members that had concerns. The line about chain of command, I think that's critical. So yeah, we definitely need to review that. In policy 3112, there's a comment in here that says this procedure is not intended to deny any staff member the right to raise matters of concern, blah, blah, blah. assuming no resolution is reached by administration. So to me, depending on how you interpret that, that sort of locks a staff member into working through up to Rick Spikuza before reaching out to the board. Again, interpretation, right? I'm not sure why we're not discussing policy 0144.2, item D. I brought this up 2 weeks ago. It says encourage, I'm sorry, I'll start. It says, as members of the Board of Education, board members will strive to improve public education, and to that end, they will, and item D specifically, encourage the free expression of opinion by all board members and seek systematic communications between the board and students, staff, and all elements of the community. So, my opinion, those two policies, 0144.2 and 3112, along with the other professional staff policy, could be considered in conflict. So, that's just another one that we need to review in this process, and I'm more than happy to work with that group to do that. I'll express my opinion as a board member and a person. I would like to see this structured so that the people who work in the district feel comfortable calling a board member and having a conversation, and board members understanding the reality that we need to listen, understand what's going on, and then make sure the proper chain of command has been followed, that the staff members had an opportunity to talk to their supervisor, that they've had an opportunity to talk to the building administrator, that they've had an opportunity to work through human resources if necessary, and that our superintendent is available if it gets to that level too. So I think there's some work for us to do on these policies, and I'm glad we're all willing to approach that and clean up some of this. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Vicki?
Yeah, the thing that Tanya had mentioned about a board member, it's not official if it's just one board member, that stuck out to me too, which kind of segues into what Steve was saying, that as a board member, the one policy states that we are to seek that communication. So yeah, some of these policies need to align with one another. There is, with the interpretation, they seem to conflict with one another. And if we don't have people talking to us, how are we going to know what's going on? So, and I want staff to feel free to come talk to us. I don't want them to feel like they're having to sneak around, or that they're, facing possible discipline or something along those lines, or whatever the case may be. But we need to look at these policies, and I can help go through some of this stuff. I should be able to have time to do that, so I can certainly help with this one.
Hey, I'll also comment on Tanya's point. When we went through all these policies, we broke the board down into really pairs, and two people worked on different sections and groupings, and it was a lot of work, and it took, it seems like it was a year of going through policies. So, but the point of having policies is to follow them, but then when you find concerns or things that can be improved, then we go back and look at them, and that's what we're going to do. So that's great.
And Steve, and you brought up, and sort of Vicki, board member ethics, 0144.2, specifically D. And I think this is just an example of where I think we can do better, which is when I read D and it says, and seek systematic communication, I took heart to systematic. To me, that's not phone calls, walking around. I mean, that's like purposeful, planned, like surveys, stuff like that. So if that's not each of our interpretation, I think that's an opportunity for us to clarify, because I interpret that differently. But to me, that's just an example of exactly why we're having these conversations.
Agreed.
Yeah. Excellent conversation, you guys. And I want it to be really clear to the administrators too. This is not about us. We don't want to play manager. I don't want. That's not the board's role, and I don't want it. It's too much work. We want to make it so it's easier for people to talk to us and share concerns, and then point them in the right direction. And Steve said it perfectly. I think that's exactly where we want to get it to. What I want to do is try to get 2 board members that will volunteer to serve on a committee that will help shape this up with partners from the district.
Why, I already heard Vicky volunteer.
I did too, but I won't put you on the spot, Vicky. I think we can probably get those names offline and just make sure.
No, I'm willing to. That's
an
fine.
acceptance?
Yeah.
You heard Steve volunteer too, but.
All right. Right on.
All of this policy stuff was done before I came on board, so feel free to toss me into the policy review.
Great.
And I just want to clarify for the public, I think probably many people already know this, but we have a 2-person committee because 3 would be a quorum. So it's really 2 of us can work at these things at a time, then bring it back, and that's why it's quite a process. It takes a couple months to really get some things changed because we have to work separately on them. But thank you guys.
I would not anticipate this having a first reading in January. It's probably going to take a few months to get on there. All right. Any further discussion on that? All right. We'll move on to item F, the board policy around the discussion of public comment, and much of the same. This is, I think I'm looking at this one just over the last, I don't know, when did COVID start? 2 years ago.
17, 2020. Not that I remember.
Spring break.
Public comment has become a topic of many school districts, and many school districts have gone through a process to provide more detail and more clarity around the public comment at board meetings with the intention of trying to maximize the amount of public comment that we can handle, but still leave time for business items. I've kind of done a little bit of research from districts in the surrounding area, as well as some of the other board members too. But this is another one that I think we want to tackle and try to have a revamp. Right now, our public comment at board meetings is it's vague. I have a tough time even. It's hard to use to govern a board meeting when there's some heated public comments, and trying to govern or trying to run a meeting using policy. It has to be a lot more clear than what we have, and I think that's the goal here. I think we need to provide a lot more clarity around the boundaries of what can and cannot be said in public comment, length of time, along with a lot of other things. So I'm throwing it out there. I teed it up. Does anybody have any comments on this one here?
Well, I can start. This is one that I've been working on and doing some research on as well. And Mr. Roll brought up a point of not wanting us to use it as a way to limit comments and stuff. And I just want to say, from my perspective, for me anyways, it's quite the opposite. I want to make sure that voices are heard, and multiple perspectives on a similar topic in something that we have control over, right? And just like tonight is related to agenda items. So we've also, just like we've gotten feedback about, staff members being able to talk to board members, we have feedback, or at least I have feedback of individuals not feeling comfortable to comment during that section. And so really I think we need to put some parameters at play that allow for multiple voices to feel comfortable. That is what makes us a community and great, is multiple perspectives. So we want to add, or at least I want to add, some more information around how that might look like, but yet still manage in a controlled amount of time to still go through a 3-hour agenda and be able to put energy and effort into all of those agenda items 3 hours later. So really I think it's just, for me anyways, it's to add voice to people and make sure that we're talking about things that we have control over, since it is a working board meeting.
Yeah, and I can add, I think quite frankly, people, they feel stonewalled. They come up to the podium, they may ask a question, and we all just kind of stare at them. And then eventually we'll say, Dr. Spacuzza will get back to you. And the problem for me with that, the first one, is that there are people in the audience that want the same answer, right? They've got the same question. So now they're going to have to reach out to Dr. Spacuzza or Mike or someone else to try and get the same thing answered. Now, we have to be wary, right? You know, there are going to be questions that maybe we can't answer at that moment because we don't have the information in front of us. I think that should be understood and documented. And then if it gets to an inflammatory situation, well, then it's outside the parameter of the business meeting, and you know, we can address that. But you know, and I don't have the answer tonight, but I think those are perspectives that we need to discuss and see how we can make that, you know, so people are more comfortable coming up and having a comment, and you know, and maybe we can address it, or we can at least say, hey, you know, we understand where you're coming from, those types of things. But anyway, I'll stop there, but those are just my thoughts.
Vicki, did you have any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, what Steve said about someone asks a question and there's multiple people who are seeking the same answer. And when it's brought up in our meeting, in a public meeting like that, to then have the answers be given privately and on a one-on-one situation, that then you get a lot of people going, well, what did they say to you? What did you hear? And I think we just need to be able to somehow, yes, if we can tie the comments to the agenda, and then throughout our discussion or whatever we're doing, if we have the opportunity then to get those questions answered for everybody, I think that would be great. So if, yeah, you guys are working on this and can come up with something for us to follow and for the public to follow, so that we can be more clear, I think would be great.
All right, thanks, Vicki. Pat?
I'm not going to add anything that Tanya and Steve and Vicki didn't already say, but I agree with all three of them, and that's their direction I hope we go here.
Shay, any thoughts on public comment sections?
Not right now. Yeah. Yeah, not at this time.
Okay. All right, so I'm rather passionate about this one. Tanya, it sounds like maybe you and I could take this one offline and try to come up with some things
Sounds great.
that we can propose. All right. I think we're done with item F. We'll move on to item G. Reminder of the next regular board meeting for January 12th.
Yes, just a reminder that some of the board members and the superintendent will be at the state convention the week of January 19th to the 21st. Therefore, we have moved the regular school board meeting to January 12th. I also wanted to make sure that we coordinated your calendars. Is that my understanding is that there is a closed session that you would like to schedule for January 5th and also for January 12th.
Yeah, so I was going to tie that into this item as well. So we need to move the board meeting up because of the convention. Also within the same breath, we're going through the superintendent evaluation process that's underway, and we need a closed session to discuss it as a board, and then another closed session to go through it with superintendent. And those dates, the 5th and the 12th, those are the proposed dates. Hopefully we can get everything wrapped up by then. And then I would envision February being the month where, you know, last year we did that public statement for the first time, and that would be probably appropriate at that meeting to have a public statement prepared for the February board meeting. Any comments or questions on that, board? So that's what we're looking at.
And,
so get your evals done.
Any recommendations on a time for the 5th? You're not...
January 5th?
Yeah, you have no
I think
constraints.
we're locked in at 6.
I'd like to propose 6 if that works for you guys.
We had talked about 6, but
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, and then the 12th I think we're gonna need to understand what else is in closed session on the 12th, because we might have to have a before and after if we have to go that route. So we'll leave that open. And then the other piece to this with board meetings are the workshops that I think we need. We've been talking a lot about the district report card here tonight. I heard several comments. I'd like to at least get it on the radar to try to schedule a workshop to go through the district report card, and Dr. Spicuzza, I'll just leave it up to you kind of work with your administrators to make sure that you have, ample time to prepare for it and present to the board the report card numbers and the data, as well as, plans for addressing gaps and celebrating achievements. I'll stop there. Is there anybody else that would like to add anything to that about what you would like to see from a workshop for the report card?
Well, for me, it's mostly just addressing gaps. I think just we have some of the data and love to have like a good dive in, but concentrate on how we're going to move forward and problem solve.
Anything from the phones?
No.
Nope.
It's technically Zoom. We're not really using phones anymore.
No, I mean, I agree with everything Tommy said. Let's focus on let's celebrate the success, focus on the gaps. I'd be interested too, hopefully by that time we have this, we'll see what the next board meeting brings in terms of a vote for the early release, but how strategies, are incorporated into, some of that modeling as well.
Yeah. I know it's going to take time to put it together, you guys, and we're not asking you to work over holiday break here to get something ready for us for our workshop, but we're just looking to try to get it on people's radar so we can have a good, healthy discussion about it. And the last item on workshop-related topics is we've been talking about this for at least probably a year and a half to 2 years, but doing a board self-evaluation and having Teamworks help guide us through that workshop. And I'd like to get that on the calendar as well. I know we've talked about it in the past. I don't necessarily, if you guys have any comments on it now, that's great. But I think it's something that I'd like to try to get on the calendar as well. And that's something that we probably would just need to work with Christina on to find out what her dates are, but I'm gonna need to probably understand if we're gonna do this. I would kind of propose maybe late January, early February for this one, and try to get some time from Christine and go through like a self-evaluation of the board.
And I think it'd be a good tie-in with your two committees that are working on policies as well, as you try to put that together.
Yeah, right on, because if we're gonna talk about staff and board communication, what is our role, I think that has to be part of it to understand that. So yes. Any comments or questions from anybody on this one?
Nope, on board. I think we've for a handful of years, we have been working towards kind of our overall district plan and guide, and this has been part of it, is that we do a board evaluation as part of a continuous improvement process. And so that's something I think I think we're ready to go right before COVID, and I think we're at a place that we need to come back to it.
Okay. So I know I slammed a bunch of stuff in there on that last one, but I wanted to get it out there. I'll work with the board and Christine to find a date that works for all of us. And we'll shoot for sometime late January, early February if we can. Winter seems to be the best time to do this type of stuff for us.
When's the board conference again?
19th through the 21st.
All right. I guess we're going to move on to item 8. That concludes the information discussion. We'll move on to item 8, recognition of visitors. Is there anybody that would still care to be recognized at this time? Come on up.
All right, so am I still held to the 3-minute rule? Yes.
Well, I haven't been really doing a very good job
now.
enforcing that anyways, Joe, so you might as well take advantage of it.
All right, so I'll try to make this as quick as I can. Just a little bit of feedback. And Joe Roll, I'm from Clifton Township, for those that don't know me. So regarding the discussion around early release tonight, I guess I want to clarify one thing. I was really inspired by administration's vision for what they want to do and how they want to change up how we're doing the work of the district and educate. So I appreciate that they're working on this and they see the need to change. Let's face it, the latest Twitter CEO did not come from the United States. Why is that? You can look across industry, you can see a trend, and the trend says that the United States doesn't do the job we used to globally competing with other countries. And you know, I think as you have your discussions around the report card, you're gonna find that we might wanna be cautious about using that report card to really measure the progress we're making as a district. The data that I've been looking at makes me a little uneasy. And the reason is because to look at where we are relative Hudson or River Falls gives me an idea how we're doing locally. But are we in a fishbowl? Are we frogs in boiling water? Is the state as a whole competing more poorly than it could be or should be? It's good to hear that we have a vision to break away and, you know, to go for the high achievement. I am going to forward to you PDF copies of what I downloaded and looked at thus far to the board members, just so you could take a look. I did not encounter the numbers that Mike was talking about tonight, but I assume that that's purely because I'm looking at different data or not looking in the right place. One thing I recognize looking at the copy that I have with me is it's a report card for 2020-2021 for the Prescott School District, but it says in the upper right corner, public report. So if there's a difference in the information they distribute online to the public versus what's available to administration, that'd be good to know, and I'm asking if that's the case. Then just that's all I've got for that. Oh, one other thing I would say is consider adding 4 in-service days to this calendar year to support Mike's vision and leave the Mondays alone. I think that's an option that would be viable also that wasn't discussed. The other thing then, I would move on to the referendum. What's the term on the bond that we would like, if the electors approve the referendum for 15 million, how long are we borrowing that money for? Is it a 15-year bond? No, 20? What?
Are we allowed to respond?
Go ahead, yeah.
All right, so it'll be at the time of the bidding. So once the bonds are, when approved, then it goes out for bid, whatever the best interest rate and overall principal. That's what we use Baird Financial to assist us with. So it could be 20 or 15, depending on what the best package is.
Okay. Now, I want to caution the board on the term of zero cost. So what I seen put up there was accurate. It said based on Baird Financial's calculation, there will be zero increase in the tax levy, or the mill rate, I should say. But let's be honest, the mill rate will stay the same, but the levy will increase. And the reason the mill rate would stay the same is they're making presumptions about the growth and the valuation of the district based on the current trends in real estate value. And so the reason I bring that up is I think the thing that there's a lot of common ground here that can help support getting this referendum passed. I personally looked through the data, the information that the committee was looking at. I didn't see anything on there that we shouldn't do, you know, but Steve Sizemore, I think, said it real well when he pointed out that there's a lot of people, a lot of taxpayers, parents, grandparents in the community that feel like it's a surprise that we have $15 million worth of maintenance to do. And I sympathize with the position the district has been the last 20 years. I've been watching it for 20 years fairly closely. You're in the best financial condition I've ever seen. I understand why is it 46 or 47?
47.
Fund 46 isn't funded in a way that lets you just pull money out and take care of all this. But I think something that would give credibility or give ease to someone that wants to give you $15 million bond permission would be, hey, this is our 10-year vision, and guess what? Every time the valuation goes up enough to allow us to increase the levy, we're going to increase the levy and stick that into Fund 46 and try to buy down on the need next time. And that's the thing that people have been talking about. It's something you need to consider. I think that 20 years from now, interest might be so high that you won't have this option. Who knows what property values would be? It'd be wise to, if you have those plans, that's something that you should share with the public, because it would give credibility to the rest of the hard work that went into this. None of us want to borrow money for 20 years for 5-year items, okay? So honestly, that list looked very good. Staff did a very good job putting it together. There's a lot of $50,000, $80,000 items on there, you know, that constitute that. I think there's a lot of reasons to support it. But I also think that there's people that'll look for a reason not to. And not having that plan out in front of us is one of those reasons that some may choose to use to say no when they pull the curtain or pull up to that voting machine. And then, let's see, that's it. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, Joe. Anybody else care to be recognized?
Hi, Jennifer Hansen. I live in Prescott. I have 3 kids in the district. I wasn't going to talk tonight, but I have been sitting there getting upset because I heard that Stites was resigning. That now leaves 2 core teachers in 7th grade empty. That's a crisis. Especially losing a teacher that makes great connections with students. We got to figure this out. We got to figure out how to get and retain good teachers. I know 2 extra hours on Mondays may help. I just hope that's enough. I don't think it is. We need to start thinking outside the box more. I know from the parent group perspective, we're thinking of things that we can do. I don't know that a handful of parents, though, can make a difference either. We need everybody to be thinking outside the box what we can do, because we can't lose any more at all. So I appreciate everybody taking the time and looking through the 2-hour. I loved the presentation that was done. I think it's going to be great for our teachers. I think it's a step in the right direction. I just think we need more. We can't lose any more teachers. Thank you.
Thanks, Jen.
Jim Waslewick, Oak Grove. So the last time I stood before this board, not this board, but the Prescott School Board, was making the recommendation that resulted in this school. So in that time, I want to go by, since Mike is the only one that was on the board at the time, I want to go by, review that, that recommendation. So that recommendation, point number 1 was a new high school. Point number 2 was an auditorium. Point number 3 was to move the intermediate students to the middle school and the middle school students to the former high school. And point 4 was to return this district, a long-range plan to return this district to 3 buildings. Think about that list. The board ignored the auditorium, the public rebelled. And point 3, you did not do the moves that we suggested. That's biting you in the butt now. Point 4, returning this district to 3 buildings. So since that time, 7 years ago, we've pissed away $750,000 a year of operational dollars by running a 4th building. Bottom line here is that $700,000 or $750,000 a year could have gone into Fund 46. So my problem with this whole referendum right now is you guys didn't plan ahead. And some of you weren't here to make that plan, but you're not doing it now either. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Anybody else care to be recognized? All right. Before we move on to item 9, I just want to end on a good note. It is one of our school board members' birthdays this Friday. Steve Sizemore, I believe. What are you turning, 75 now?
76.
Happy 50th birthday on Friday, Steve. All right, thanks, everyone. Let's take a motion to adjourn.
There's the birthday boy.
So
Have a happy
moved.
birthday.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Bye.
Opposed? We're adjourned. Happy birthday, Steve.
Good night.